Freddy versus Jason. Place your bets.
Hello, listeners past, present, and future. This is Haddonfield Radio, where, as always, we bring you the history, legacy, and lore of movies, trailers, and more. My name, as always, is Christian White.
And I'm Joe Francazio.
And today, we are bringing you a phenomenally exciting experience, which just so happens to be the Season 2 finale, Episode 22, if you can believe that. 22 of Haddonfield Radio. And Joe, why don't you tell everybody listening exactly what we are going to be talking about?
Sure, this is a fun one. This is going to be Freddy versus Jason from 2003.
The Ronny Yu directed film. Certainly a fan favorite in terms of both the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise as well as the Friday the 13th franchise. You don't see many fans complaining about this one.
No, in fact, it probably exists mainly because of fans.
I agree.
You know, over the years sort of wanting it and always bringing it up. And yeah, it's just a fun movie. You can't, I think, go into it thinking too seriously.
Yeah, it's far from a perfect film.
No, but it's just fun. If you can go into it just trying to have fun and enjoy some two iconic characters, then it is great. I really enjoy it.
I don't know about you, but I am a fan of versus movies. Whether it's Godzilla versus Kong, whether it is Batman versus Superman, whether it's Alien versus Predator. I love the general milieu of the versus movie. I love when you have two characters that you love up against each other where it's really almost impossible to know who to root for because you love them both.
Yeah.
In terms of Freddy versus Jason, it's literally the perfect storm of that mentality. Because as horror fans by 2003, it's not like there was a camp of people that disliked Freddy and wanted to see him lose, or a camp of people that disliked Jason and wanted to see him lose. Going into the theater in 2003 to see Freddy versus Jason, it's almost like you don't know who to root for because you love them both.
Right.
And the way you really set these movies up, I think, in a way that works fundamentally, I think what you do is you take the two characters, you have them fight against each other a couple of times, and then usually what happens is a larger adversary appears, and the two characters then have to basically team up to face off against a greater threat.
Right.
In Freddy vs. Jason, that's not the case.
No, not at all.
In other versus films that you see, like I mentioned, Batman vs. Superman, and the rest, that generally is how it works. But Freddy vs. Jason simply is these two characters that are diametrically opposed and yet are very much parallel characters in pop cultural awareness, literally just facing off. Killer takes all.
Now, it's interesting, though, to point out that the first half of the movie, though, the setup isn't for them to actually face off. Freddy is using Jason, so technically
Right.
They are existing harmoniously, and it's sort of the human, real characters that force that face-off to happen within the story. So there's a switch,
It's like Freddy essentially believing he can weaponize Jason.
Yeah.
And realizing that that's a tall order.
He didn't think about an off switch. He didn't realize how he was going to ever stop Jason.
Look, I think really, if I really was to be critical of the concept as a whole, Freddy versus Jason, I've always thought since the jump that I don't think Freddy and Jason are actually the perfect sort of match against each other. I always have thought Freddy versus Michael Myers, Jason versus Michael Myers, I mean to say, would have been, I think, a more one-to-one, sort of a more sensible matchup. Do you see what I'm saying? It's almost strange sort of having Freddy versus Jason because they exist on such different planes, even though they're both slasher characters, of course, and both exist within the slasher subgenre, as we've discussed at length over the last season.
I will respectfully disagree.
Okay, go for it.
Well, Freddy and Jason exist in a supernatural way. They can almost not be killed. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Michael Myers, as much as there's a supernatural element to why he is evil, he is ultimately still a human that is gonna die if you plunge anything through his heart.
But just in terms of iconography,
sure.
Don't you see where my point that Jason versus Michael, I think, would have made more sense in terms of their characters, in terms of their presence. But you know what? I do really like your point that you're making, the supernatural angle that sort of ties the Freddy character and the Jason character together on that plane.
Because if these two characters are going to fight in the way that they usually fight or attack, they have to be able to withstand major injuries.
Absolutely.
So you have to take the death element almost out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
And I do think it's interesting at the beginning of the movie, they kind of go out of their way when Freddy is taking the form of Jason's mom to sort of explain to the audience when she has to say, your special gift is that you can never die. I don't think it's ever really been said so plainly about Jason before.
Where it's almost like attributed to, this is now Jason's like superpower.
Yeah, I mean, it almost gets ridiculous in terms of the movies where you constantly think he's dead, actually dead, and then he keeps coming back. But now that you just sort of have this rule applied that for whatever reason, that he cannot die according to this ghostly image of his mom. But
I mean, what an unbelievable... we're going to touch on all this stuff at length, but what an unbelievable development hell that this film went through. I'm going to be honest with you. I think in the annals of development hell stories and narratives connected to the making of films, Freddy vs. Jason has to be one of the most extraordinary shitstorms, for lack of a better term, that has ever coalesced in the history of movie making.
Yeah.
I mean, the road that ultimately led to Ronny Yu's 2003 film was so peppered with starts and stops that honestly, we could probably spend an entire 2+ hour episode just taking you through that entire journey.
Well, I mean, thank God they all could see the potential in this idea and they kind of kept circling back. But Robert Englund says in a ton of interviews that the idea, the first time he became aware of it was as early as like 85 or 86 at like a meeting fans and having fans come up to him and
absolutely,
and start saying who would win, Freddy versus Jason in this type of a thing. So it's got a long history of its conceptual idea being out there in the world.
I want to throw another kind of meta argument as to why I almost think Jason and Michael might have been a more interesting match. And I'm going to go back to that again.
I disagreed with you on that one, did you?
I'm not going to let this go because I've been thinking about this for many, many years. This oh my God, why couldn't they have made Jason versus Michael? Or you could have called it Friday the 31st, which I think might actually be an existing fan film at this point.
If rights could have been figured out, I mean, I think those matchups were talked about along the way.
But hold on, I only want to say it on a meta level in that Jason, as we all know, from the point of his conceptualization, from the point of where the Friday the 13th franchise had its conceptualization, was basically a ripoff of Halloween, a ripoff trying to find a way to cleverly copy the success of John Carpenter and Deborah Hill and Irwin Yablon's Halloween, and to copy and to sort of emulate the success of its main villain, Michael Myers. Jason, and I'm not throwing shade here. We, as all horror fans know, even Sean S. Cunningham, who created Friday the 13th, the original film, and Victor Miller, they were so, I would say, the nice way of putting it is they were so impressed and inspired by the success of Halloween in 1978, they wanted to get in on that action.
Yeah.
And Jason very much is, for good or for bad, essentially a ripoff of the success of Michael Myers.
There were a lot of films that were trying to do the Halloween thing, and for whatever reason...
I mean, the whole subgenre.
Well, but and Friday the 13th just seemed to resonate a little bit more with everybody than some of the others, and it's just kind of took on a life of its own.
I just want to ask you, and then I promise I'll shut up. Who would win in a fight, Jason versus Michael?
Oh, well,
I'm saying they're in...
My logic brain that says, well, it has to be Jason because he can't die.
Let's just say, forget the storylines or movies or any of the iconography of the mythology of either character. Yeah. They're in the UFC octagon. It's Jason with a machete, Michael with the kitchen knife. Who wins?
I guess my gut instinct is to say Jason.
I'm going to say... I have to, unfortunately, agree. And I hate myself for agreeing.
Well, I mean, I think Jason's just more of a brutal character.
Yeah, I agree.
And he kills to kill, where Michael
is more like
methodical,
thoughtful, kind of presumptive killer, where Jason is a maniac.
I can't see Michael suddenly having to move quick or attack hard. Where Jason,
I think it would be a fight.
Oh, it would.
Make no mistake.
Yeah, of course, but it's just two totally different things. You know?
I know in my heart that it wouldn't be quick. Michael Myers wouldn't go down like a chump.
No.
But I have to say, and maybe there are fans listening to this that feel betrayed by my point here, but I do have to agree with Joe. Ultimately, I do think, even though I personally prefer Michael Myers, I do think Jason would prevail.
Yeah.
I think, though, in a film pitting the two of them, if I was doing the film, I think Michael would come out on top. Personally, in a narrative film. But in a one-on-one match, I'd probably give it to Jason. Now, Freddy does very well, surprisingly, against Jason in this film.
I was just going to make a joke. Really, the winner is whoever's distribution company has the rights. You know what I mean?
I think that is the cynically true point.
For a while, some of the problems with the development of this movie came down to the fact that even when New Line and when Paramount had the rights for Friday the 13th, even when they both wanted to make this movie, the problem ended up being that neither one of them wanted to sell the rights to the other person, because whoever had the rights was going to control the characters, you know?
Right.
And it was like neither one of them wanted to give their character up to the other. And that kind of kept falling apart until the rights came back into Sean Cunningham's court after Paramount lost it.
The thing is, when I was doing the research for this episode, there were so many points, when even going through my notes on the way here today, where I get so confused by the sheer amount of times the rights go from one person to another, or revert from this company to that company. It's so confusing to me, that end of the movie business.
It was like this. There was a bunch of times they tried to make this movie, and like I said, it came down to like business stuff, rights, and who wanted to take control, and it would fall apart. And then it would get to points where, okay, everyone's sort of on board, and then they just couldn't get a script for a while that was, worth them making, or they felt like it was worth them making, and it would fall apart again. And then it would just kept getting revived by different producers and writers along the way. Some of them who've gone on to have big careers, but at the time were young and starting out, and like none of these scripts were doing it, and then eventually, there's only so much time anyone is signed on in the movie world to do things, and eventually it just goes away because people have to go on to other projects.
Yes, no, that's true. It's a good point. I want to take us back a little bit. I know we're talking about Freddy versus Jason as a film, but for me to really dive into that personally, I would like to take a couple minutes and jump back a little bit in time and talk a little bit about the origins of Freddy and the origins of Jason. Now, if you've been listening to the last many episodes that basically comprise the entirety of Season 2, we've been taking you through, movie by movie, of course, the history of the character of Freddy. And to my mind, when you think about the conceptualization and the origin of the character of Freddy, it's a very well-worn trail. The credit is placed in very easy and manageable places. We, of course, know the famous anecdote of Wes Craven as a little boy. He peers out his bedroom window, and in the darkness in the alley outside his bedroom window, he sees this miscreant, kind of maligned man in a greasy fedora who locks eyes with the childhood Craven and lets out this creepy laugh. And whether or not that anecdote actually occurred in reality or not, it's become intertwined forever as part of the origin story of the character of Freddy, because that event led to a lifetime of nightmares and neurosis for Wes Craven, who and eventually filtered out as the character of Freddy Krueger. We also know the famous anecdote of special effects makeup artist David A. Miller staring at a pepperoni pizza while he was working on the development of the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and saying to himself, "That's Freddy Krueger's face." Mm-hmm. And using that, burnt cheese and melted cheese and pepperoni, it just, inspired him to say, that's how I'm going to create the burn makeups that will create Freddy. I also read a very interesting anecdote. David A. Miller, at the exact same time that he was working on A Nightmare on Elm Street, in 1983, him and his team were also working on the Tom Ebersol film Night of the Comet.
Oh, wow.
And the interesting story goes that David A. Miller was illustrating a design for a makeup that was going to be used on Night of the Comet for this zombie police officer character. Wes Craven comes into David A. Miller's office because Miller was working on Nightmare on Elm Street's development in tandem, and looks over David A. Miller's shoulder, and Wes Craven just points down to the illustration and says, "That's Freddy." And David A. Miller has to say to him, "Well, no, that's actually from Night of the Comet that I'm also working on." He goes, "Well, that's what I want Freddy to look like." So all I'm trying to say is there is such a well-worn trail of anecdotes that clearly illustrate the creation of the character of Freddy Krueger. Mm-hmm. When you think about the creation of the character of Jason Voorhees, boy, howdy, is it a completely different story. The creation of Jason Voorhees really is one of the most complicated and fought over histories, I think, of any character easily in the horror genre. But of any iconic movie character, Jason, to this day, people are still fighting over that credit. Mm-hmm. I want to throw a few of the people who are involved. Of course, you have Sean S. Cunningham and Victor Miller. Mm-hmm. Cunningham directed the original Friday the 13th, created the concept for it. He actually created the concept for it before there was even a movie. Mm-hmm. He put an ad in Variety that said, "Coming soon, Friday the 13th, the scariest movie ever made." But there wasn't even a script. Yeah. There wasn't even an idea. He brought Victor Miller on board. Victor Miller creates this very Agatha Christie-esque, 10 Little Indians-esque story of teenagers being picked off one by one, and you try to figure out who the killer is. Mm-hmm. And at the end, the killer is revealed, and there's an interesting twist. And of course, it's Pamela Voorhees, and her son had been neglected as a camper and died, her son Jason. Mm-hmm. But is that really the creation of Jason Voorhees, the character that we know? Or was Jason at that time used primarily as a piece of plot mechanics?
Yeah, I think for the first one,
right,
they had no idea of what it was going to become.
So, and yet, at the very end of the first movie, there is perhaps its most iconic moment and its most iconic scene that is nowhere in the original script for Friday the 13th, where the final girl, and I'm blanking on the character's name, but she's floating around in the little dinghy and she's just survived this horrible trauma. Everyone else is dead. And then suddenly, of course, the young Jason jumps up out of the water and of course it's perceived to be a dream.
Right.
But, of course, by Friday the 13th Part 2, Jason is alive, and he is the killer. Now, Jason as the killer is getting us closer to what we associate as Jason Voorhees. If you were to ask anyone, even a non-horror movie fan, who is Jason Voorhees, everybody knows that Jason is the masked killer, right?
Yeah.
But even in part 2, he was not the hockey mask-clad killer. So he still really wasn't the Jason that we know by his iconic silhouette, by his iconic iconography. He simply wasn't that yet. And by part 2, you have Ron Kurz. Now, Ron Kurz writes part 2. He was an uncredited writer on part 1 as well. He did some of the work on part 3 as well. So he has a lot of ownership over these characters.
Whoever wrote part 3 probably should get...
Well, Ron Kurz claims not only that he created the contextual idea of Jason as the killer, but he also claims that he came up with the idea to have Jason emerge up out of the water at the end of part 1.
Gotcha.
I will tell you that's not true.
Okay.
That's attributable to Tom Savini.
Okay.
Now, of course, Tom Savini was the special effects makeup artist starting from the beginning of Friday the 13th. We all know as horror fans who Tom Savini is. In my mind, Tom Savini is the father of Jason Voorhees. In my mind, as a fan, but I would even go so far as to say objectively, I would make the argument that Tom Savini is the creator of the Jason Voorhees that pops into your mind when you hear the name Jason Voorhees. Now, as much as I think the sack over the head with the one eye is maybe infinitely more terrifying than the hockey mask, when you think of Jason Voorhees, you picture the machete and the hockey mask, which of course comes into play in part 3.
Yep.
Now, part 2 and part 3 have the same director, Steve Miner, who also directed Halloween H2O.
Right.
So he has some ownership over these decisions as well, and he claims some ownership over the creation of Jason as well.
Well, it wouldn't have been the writer for that movie who has made the decision to put the mask on Jason.
Well, the funny thing is, there are still other people that have come out of, not the woodwork, because these guys were there since the beginning, but there was a producer named Phil Scuderi, who really is a producer in that he was one of 3 guys who paid for the original Friday the 13th film to be made.
Right.
He and 2 other guys, they owned the Empire movie theater chain in the 70s, and they had all this capital to play with, and so they decided they would try to make films themselves. So they also claim ownership over not only the Friday the 13th franchise, but Jason Voorhees himself, even though Jason Voorhees as a killer didn't really come into play in the second movie, and didn't really come into play in terms of, like I said, his iconography until the third movie.
Yeah.
Now, this sounds pretty long-winded, but this stuff is really important to the story of Jason and to the understanding of Jason going forward. And if you've been following along with Haddonfield Radio, Season 1 and Season 2, you probably have a decent idea or guess as to where we're going for Season 3. And so this information to me is very important. The idea of who created Jason, who is the father of Jason Voorhees as a character. I think if I was going to be covering the Friday the 13th films, it would be a major issue that I would want to cover going forward. And I want to say right from the jump that in my heart of hearts, it's Tom Savini that is ultimately...
But why? He did the makeup.
He created the makeup, and I'm going to give you a couple reasons why.
But how did he lead to the hockey mask machete guy that we all think of?
Because it was Tom Savini who first decided to have who first volunteered the idea to have Jason jump up out of the water, dream sequence or not, in the beginning, which places him as an antagonist character at the end.
Yeah.
Right, sorry. Okay? He said himself, well, the idea came to me for that because I saw the movie Carrie. And that's the ending of Carrie. They're at the gravesite of Carrie White, and all of a sudden her hand, it's a shock ending. The hand comes up out of the grave and grabs Amy Irving. And the whole audience jumps out of their skin. Okay, but the strange thing is, when it comes to Carrie, they ripped that off, too, from Deliverance. The ending of Deliverance.
I can't out the What's the very ending of Deliverance? I can't
Same
remember.
thing. You think the
Just
guy's
the
dead,
hand?
and the hand
Yeah.
comes up out of the lake.
Yeah.
So and it's not really even a ripoff.
Yeah.
It's actually not a ripoff. What it really is, it's just like something like Tarantino always does. It's just quoting. It's like quoting another movie. It's like using the audience's understanding of scenes from other movies to enrich their experience with the movie they're watching now.
Now,
Okay.
all right, now back to how Savini leads to.
Savini, the reason why is it's all about context. It was Savini who first decided, even though Ron Kurz claims he came up with the idea for Jason to come up out of the water at the end of the original film. I think that's BS. I think he just is trying to grab that credit. I believe, first off, there are photographs from the set of Friday the 13th that show Tom Savini literally in the water with Ari Lehman, who's the actor that plays the original childhood Jason.
I'm not trying to. I'm just playing devil's advocate. But wouldn't he be if he's doing makeup for the movie? Either way.
But he was the one who said, we're going to make him the Mongoloid. Okay, he's the Mongoloid hydrocephalus. He had water on the brain. Now, Mongoloid is the word I'm using. It's an insensitive word in 2024, but it is an important word because it was the word that Tom Savini used. And then later in interviews, Betsy Palmer, who played Pamela Voorhees in the original film, she refers to this story of her asking, well, Tom, she saw the makeup that was going to be on Ari Lehman, who was going to be playing the young Jason, and she said to Tom Savini, well, why is his eyes, why is one of his eyes so low? Why does he look so weird? And Tom Savini said to her, because he's a mongoloid and had hydrocephalus, which is water on the brain in infancy. So he's, he's got problems. He's got issues.
Boy, water just gets Jason one way or the other.
And at that time, it was to engender more sympathy from the audience for the character as a piece of plot machinery.
Yeah.
Because remember, in the first movie, Jason in the screenplay is only there as a driving force to make the killer make sense.
And it's just and it's only in flashbacks. We don't actually ever see current Jason, do we? In the first movie, like
only in the very, very end, in that dream sequence when he pops out of the water.
Which
you only
now,
hear about him.
Forgive me if I'm wrong, but isn't there another scene after he pops out where she's talking to the cops, going to the ambulance or something, and she asks about the boy?
He's in the water,
and,
the little
and they're like, "What are you
boy."
talking about? There's no boy and all that."
Which
So-
makes other fans think it's not a dream sequence. And considering that he comes back and she dies at the beginning of part 2, that it was not a dream sequence. I don't.
No,
again,
of course
I guess
not.
it's some supernatural
just
explanation.
It's one of the suspend your disbelief moments that you have to have in any of these movies.
In part 2, Jason does not seem like he's driven by supernatural force. He just seems like a demented redneck.
He hasn't been killed.
Right.
We don't know of that.
But whoa. But yes, he was. We know this because that's why his mother was driven insane, because he drowned as a little boy. The campers were fornicating, they weren't paying attention, he was neglected, and he drowned.
So, I know, we should be saving this for
No.
I haven't done my research.
I know, but this stuff is important.
He pops up in part 2, just, we have
when
to,
you get to part 2, he's an adult.
And we don't question why he's there.
And he's sort of like a local legend.
I know, he has like a little house and
it's
all that
almost
stuff
like,
in the woods, right?
It's almost like the campfire ghost stories that have been told over these subsequent years between Pamela Voorhees' decapitation and the events of part 2, almost like manifested Jason into reality as a human again.
And to kind of come full circle, while Freddy versus Jason was in developmental hell for a long time, one of the ideas that they kept trying to rework in the script was that it was actually focused on like a cult called the Fredheads.
Right.
And
this is really cool too.
They were obviously they worshiped Freddy, but they kind of wanted to make this matchup happen, and they actually resurrect Freddy and Jason.
Now
they're able to conjure both of them up in, I don't know how they were going to do it, but
that was from the very beginning of the Freddy versus Jason development process. And if you go back, I think it was episode 18 of Haddonfield Radio, Nightmare 5, Dream Child, I talk about the splatterpunk era of horror literature.
Yeah.
And really, the father of the splatterpunk horror movement was a guy named David J. Shaw. and he's a novelist. He created the books Kill Riff. He wrote this short story collection, I think, called Lost Angels, and is really considered a beloved horror author who was really at the forefront of that really visceral, gnarly period in horror literature. And he came on board at the beginning of the Freddy versus Jason development process and came up with that Cult of Freddy angle, which to this day I still think is one of the great unused Freddy Krueger mythology concepts. And it sort of reminds me a bit of the Peter Jackson ideas that he developed around the time of Freddy's Dead.
And he's also somebody else who was brought in, I believe, 2 times.
To do Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah, they tried having him write a script, and they tried, I think, pairing him up with Guillermo del Toro at one point to try and work something out, and ultimately they didn't. There were a lot of screenwriters, directors who got to try, and in terms of directing, what they did, which was a little unusual, is they kind of just said, look, we will take a meeting with literally anybody if you want to come in and audition for this movie. And so, you know, they kept meeting people along the way that seemed promising, and then they would start working with them and be like, okay, well actually they don't have enough experience as a director, or it just didn't work out, or whatever. But there were a lot of people. Again,
at the very beginning of the road of the Freddy vs. Jason, back, I'm talking like 1987, 88, 89. Even way back then. Tom McLaughlin, who directed my second favorite Friday the 13th film, which is Jason Lives. He was sort of hired essentially to create the platform of ideas, or to basically what they would call like a writer's room now for TV or development or idea development, and to come up with just, like you were saying, general ideas to get the ball on Freddy vs. Jason rolling. Because the general idea at that time was, look, even though the rights are a mess and a tangled mess, if we could come up with a concept that is so commercial that would make everyone money, then I bet we could iron out those ideas, those disputes more readily. And so what Tom McLaughlin came on to do was to come up with that golden idea that would settle all these disputes just based on its money-making potential. And all said and done, even after decades literally of development, Freddy vs. Jason was a massive moneymaker.
Oh, it was.
It had almost a $40 million opening weekend.
Yeah, critics were a little divided.
In 2003.
So about it, but the fans loved it. And it was the 2 writers that get the credit for the movie at the end of the day, Damian Shannon and Mark Swift. You know, what they did that the other people didn't do, which kind of makes this work, is, you know, all these other writers were trying to come up with these new, unique angles, things like the Fred heads and all that. But what they did is they kind of threw everything away that had been developed, and they started at the very end of Jason Goes to Hell, when you see the glove come up and pull the mask.
Right.
And they said, that's our starting point. Why is Freddy doing that? And they went from there, and then they didn't ignore the rules and the mythos behind each of these characters like a lot of these other people were doing. They made sure they stuck to what the fans were expecting and knew about these characters, and they kind of even told, like, New Line, like, if you do this, the fans will love you. If give them the things that they are looking for and they want and they know and love about these characters, and they did a great job of doing that. But it was they wrote like a 2.5 hour movie.
You almost and you know, going with that 2.5 hour spec script piece that I saw in my research as well, it really did stick in my mind, because I almost feel like I think fans would have sat for 2.5 hours. I think actually if you had stretched out the mythology of Freddy vs. Jason the movie and stretched out the storytelling a little bit, I don't think any fans would have complained about the running time. I think, and I think even as an R-rated film, I think it still would have had probably a very similar box office impact, even with the extended runtime. If I have a few foibles and complaints about this film, one of which is I think it's not long enough. So it feels like it's too brief, this film, for really the climactic approach that they were selling.
Yeah, but from a business standpoint,
Yeah, they wanted as many run times as they could get.
No, they want to make the shortest movie possible.
That's exactly right.
But it still be successful.
Because they want as many showings in a day as they can get.
I see what you mean. Yes.
Yeah.
And so they ended up bringing in David Goyer, who is uncredited, but he kind of went through the script and
really quick, in case you don't know, David Goyer, for good or for bad, is a very well-known and highly paid screenwriter who essentially primarily comes in on projects that are needing help.
Right.
And he applies what they call script doctoring.
Yeah.
And in terms of script doctors, David Goyer is like one of the best in Hollywood.
Yeah, even the original writers there, Shannon and Swift, like they said afterwards, like, usually you would want to complain about somebody kind of going through your work, and he kind of combined multiple characters into one and multiple scenes into one, a lot of that type of stuff. And they said he actually did a great job. They were very happy with the way he was able to pare it down, but keep the essence of what they were writing there. You know?
I just want to jump back just for a second. I just want to say, when I was going on that long rant about Savini and the ownership over Jason, I just want to say I was setting that up because it may become important in the future of the stories we're telling on Haddonfield Radio. I want to make sure you guys are listening. No, I didn't give all the details of my argument there. I'm just basically planting the seeds of my point of view as a fan subjectively in terms of Jason as a character, just in case we end up covering the Friday the 13th films going forward.
I'm going to have to do some research so I can...
I don't mean to waylay Joe, who who wasn't ready for that conversation, which is totally fair.
But actually, so it's a good point that you're bringing up.
That's all I'm trying to say is I just wanted to plant those seeds.
Right. Ultimately, though, it almost doesn't... By the time we get to this movie, unfortunately, it doesn't matter like where Jason came from, because New Line now has the rights. And they, as much as they were very careful of their treatment of their beloved Freddy, they went into the idea of Jason thinking, we want to start over, sort of. We want to have our version of Jason. We want to do it, our way. They made some major changes, obviously.
They wanted to create, to their point, and I'm not one of the producers, so this is my conjecture. But to me, it seems they wanted to create a version of Jason that exists within Freddy's reality and Freddy's universe.
Yeah, they have a shared universe.
Now, there is plenty of substantive evidence to show that they do exist in a universe together. There is, me and how much I love my unofficial trilogies in horror. Well, I've put forth somewhere along season 2 this notion that this unofficial trilogy that goes Freddy's dead, Jason goes to hell, Freddy versus Jason. Yeah. That the Freddy's dead, we see the Freddy of Nightmare on Elm Street 84 up through Freddy's dead. We see that Freddy die in Freddy's dead and go to hell, essentially. Just like in Jason Go to Hell, we see that Jason die, go to hell. The weird thing is, the Jason that pops out in the third part of my unofficial trilogy in Freddy vs. Jason is not the same Jason that went to hell in Jason Goes to Hell.
Right. I mean, they say it over and over again. I mean, we have to bring up the whole Kane Hodder thing. I mean, it's part of this too. New Line states in many interviews that their intentions were to start over with Jason.
I believe they had no intention of ever hiring Kane Hodder, even though there is some evidence that claims that they did flirt with the idea of bringing Kane in. I would argue, again, my own opinion, they did not want Kane Hodder anywhere near Jason.
I think the idea got run with in the very, very beginning, because maybe for like a hot minute, there was no one to say otherwise. But yeah, of course, we'd probably just use the guy who's been playing Jason. But as they started developing it and they got Ronny Yu involved, and this idea started to form of we want to start fresh with Jason, and I should say start fresh mainly with his image as a character, his mythos and all that's his history. They stayed true to, but it was sort of his look and his feel and the way he moved and everything. They wanted to work a little differently because of the fight sequences, because of the size difference. They actually really wanted that huge size difference between Jason and Freddy, where Kane Hodder isn't quite as tall. And so, I don't know. There's a lot of people who say this and that around whether or not Kane Hodder would have actually been used.
I think it would. Look at Kane Hodder would have actually probably made a better physical match to Robert Englund on screen in terms of the two characters, but I think that's not what they wanted.
No, they wanted their guy Freddy to look like he could overtake just like a big. You know what I mean? The bigger Jason was, the better. They give
Jason the total like Frankenstein effect, like the Ken Kersinger Jason in Freddy vs. Jason, to me, has got to be the worst of all the Jasons.
I
and
agree.
I'm sorry, and you know me, I'm never trying to be rude or picking on anyone that took part in these films, because Ken Kersinger didn't show up every day at 3:30 in the morning to start getting his makeup on because he wanted to do a lackluster job. No, he had his heart in it, and I have total respect for him in that regard. But when you look at the legacy of Jason, and you look at everything that came before it, here's the thing, and why I find it a bit bothersome and irksome. If you look at, like you were saying earlier, if you look at the depiction of Freddy in Freddy vs. Jason, you see so much of, Freddy's history, comical and otherwise, going, interpreted into the characterization within Freddy vs. Jason.
Right.
Jason, it's almost like, did these guys watch any of the Friday the 13th films? He doesn't really feel much like Jason. He doesn't feel like it's really Jason. And the way I describe this or compare this, if you're a Doctor Who fan, if there's any Doctor Who fans out there, of course there's been a dozen more people that have played the Doctor. Not all of them were really the Doctor. I can look into the eyes and say, nope, that's the Doctor. No, that's not the Doctor. When I see Ken Kersinger on screen, I don't feel like it's really Jason.
Yeah, I think it would have been more legendary to have also the most actors that are associated with their characters.
I totally agree with that.
But for whatever reason,
it should have been Kane Hodder for a number of reasons. But I think if my conjecture is accurate, I understand pragmatically perhaps why they wanted to bring in, like Joe was saying, create their own version of Jason.
And they specifically wanted him to be bigger than he had been. So it looks like Freddy's taking down a bigger person.
And I think if I was to make my thought on it, I think it's funny that a few years later, again, you have a new interpretation of Jason, and it's Derek Mears' version of Jason from the Platinum Dunes 2009 Friday the 13th, where again you have this hulking, massive Jason.
Yeah.
And yet,
at least they're rebooting.
And yet, in that movie, I find him to be frightening.
Because you can reset your brain a little bit. You're not trying to match that Jason with any of the others.
I just think
starting over a little.
As I was just thinking about it, I think it occurs to me just now. I think part of what it is in Freddy vs. Jason that stands out to me in the interpretation of Ken Kersinger's Jason is I don't feel that same matrix of threat that you feel from like a Derek Mears Jason, or for me, if you want to know who my Jason is, and again, if we cover the Friday the 13th films going forward, I'm sure I would ostensibly talk more about this when it comes up, but my Jason is Ted White. And not just because we have the same last name, no relation, as far as I know. I just think, to me, the Jason in Friday 4 is the peak, the zenith, the Everest peak of Jasonhood. Now, maybe you guys disagree, and maybe you guys have a version of Jason you like better. And as a matter of fact, it's a perfect opportunity to mention, Joe and I both, I can speak for Joe, we would love to hear, what is your favorite incarnation of Jason over the years? Let us know in the comments section. Let us know what is your favorite Jason, and when you do, let us know where you're listening from, because we love to know. So wouldn't that be a good one to hear?
I would love it, and I have a Jason / Kane Hodder fun fact.
Fun fact.
So Hodder still managed to end up in this movie. When you see a brief scene where you can see Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 on a television in the background, and it was a shot from when Kane Hodder was stunt doubling as Leatherface.
Oh, well, there you go.
And so he likes to point out that he still ended up in the movie anyway somehow.
I love this incredible pedigree that you see in many of the horror stunt performer and actors over the years, where you have like a Kane Hodder who got to play Jason and Leatherface, or who played Michael Myers and Jason? Tom Morga,
right,
plays Michael Myers, and what a great resume piece to have, right?
And Ken Kersinger, who plays Jason in this one, he was a stunt double for Jason in part 8, I want to say.
Oh, that is really interesting.
And he says he thinks that is part of the reason why he got hired too for this. Like, he wasn't unfamiliar with playing Jason. It also wasn't out of the realm of, like, wasn't that crazy, because he's played Jason even though he's a bigger guy. It's worked. And go ahead.
Well,
I was just gonna say, so Ken in general just had a long Hollywood career as being a stunt coordinator on all these
absolutely.
movies.
He is a respected stunt performer, and that's why, I'm not trying to throw any shade at him.
No. It's just I'm just
giving you my
history,
personal opinion.
And then he talks about it's kind of different for this movie because he was an actor on this one, so he wasn't allowed to do a lot of the big stunts and all that, and that was a little tough for him and different, but because he was such a...
It's like, to me, that just makes absolutely no sense.
Well,
like, this guy
insurances. It's all about
like
insurance.
You hire James Jude Courtney to play Michael Myers in the 2018 Halloween. He's doing his stunts.
But you're not going to set him on fire or anything like that in case something goes wrong.
I suppose you're right. I see what you're saying.
So there's always got to be some stunt guys.
And interesting, I'll throw a quick fun fact out there.
Yeah.
The writers of Freddy vs. Jason. Now, of course, there were dozens of writers over the decades of this film we could go through. I told you, we could spend a 2-hour episode just taking you through the development of this film. But Damian Shannon and Mark Swift, according to the Writers Guild in 2003, were credited as the authors of the film that ended up on the screen. And an interesting fun fact about them is they also wrote the Platinum Dunes 2009 Friday the 13th,
right,
which, again, I think is one of the best Friday the 13th films. There is essentially an extended cut of that film, the Marcus Nispel 2009 Friday the 13th, that I would say is one of the best Friday the 13th films. I would also say one of my favorite Friday the 13th films isn't even a part of the canonical franchise, and it's the fan film Never Hike Alone. Let me just say this right now. Right now. If you are listening to this and you have not watched Never Hike Alone, pause this. Go watch that, and we will wait. And when you come back, you can thank me. Because I've said to Joe before, and I would say it here too without any hesitation, I think it is perhaps the best horror genre fan film ever made. So check it out.
Back to you were talking about actors who were in the multiple movies. So in Freddy vs. Jason, there are 2 actors, one who plays Blake's father and one who plays the stoner kid Freeberg. Both of them are the first 2 actors to appear in a Freddy, Jason, and Michael Myers movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
Again, what a resume piece, or what a conversation piece. Like, you'll have people buying you drinks for the rest of your life just on that anecdote.
You can say that, yeah.
Just on that barroom anecdote as an actor or as a performer or as anything.
They were in Halloween Resurrection,
cool.
and then they were in this. So,
one of my favorite stories from the development of the history of development of Freddy vs. Jason, my all-time #1 undisputable favorite special effects makeup artist of all time is Rob Bottin. Rob Bottin, if you don't know, and I'm sure if you're listening to this, you do know, he famously created the truly remarkably mind-blowing practical effects in John Carpenter's The Thing that to this day have never been topped. I think that there are computer-generated effects that do not top the reality that Rob Bottin created in John Carpenter's The Thing. He is by far the genius. I think maybe only Dick Smith can stand above Rob Bottin, and that's simply, I think the edge is just legacy. But I think Bottin is the most talented of his or any other generation of kind of rock and roll special effects artists that populated the 80s and 90s, where these special effects makeup artists were literally like rock stars.
Well, I'm assuming you're leading up to that Rob was offered to direct this movie.
Well,
actually,
he was involved in the development process perhaps longer than a lot of other people over the years.
Yeah.
And what I find so interesting about it as a parallel that connects back to Savini is 1990, Tom Savini directs his one feature film he ever directed, which was the 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead. Now, it wasn't a box office success, but even the most ardent fans of George Romero's original film would probably agree that Savini's remake, amongst remakes, is very high quality. And when you think of the reason why Savini made this film and put his blood, sweat, and tears and money into this film as a director and as a producer was because, of course, as we all know as horror fans, when George Romero and John Russo made Night of the Living Dead in 1968, they were just so green as filmmakers that when they signed distribution deals just because they were so desperate for people to see their movie, especially right after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and you have that ending of Night of the Living Dead that is just accidentally reverberates with so much power that Romero knew he had to get it on the screen in 68 when America was being torn apart fiber by fiber. This was when Romero needed this was the perfect time for his art. And the funny thing about it is Romero didn't even realize he was creating this exasperated expression that matched the times. He was just creating a horror film. But it lined up. Well, because of the distribution deal did not work in his favor, he never made any money from Night of the Living Dead, George Romero.
Yeah.
And so when Savini decided to remake it in 1990, it was purely to generate revenue to give back to Romero for all the decades that came of everything that came off Night of the Living Dead that he never benefited from. And so you got to love that.
Oh, it's great.
And that Savini started in this industry because of Romero. So it's a beautiful story. So when I think about the idea of Rob Bottin directing, coming out of this unparalleled career in special effects makeup, what would he have been as a director? And the weird thing is, soon after this, not only did Bottin retire from special effects makeup, he retired from the Hollywood industry and became a realtor.
Quite a number of actors and people behind the scenes in film end up in realty.
Listen, guys, honestly, I know a great percentage of you out there listening to this, you know everything there is to know about Rob Bottin. But if you don't, I strongly suggest a Google search, because if you love horror, or you're getting into horror, or you're a lifetime fan of horror, and that name doesn't ring a bell, please do yourself a favor and look up some of his work, because as an artist in the horror genre, we were so lucky to have him. Brilliant. So I would have loved to see.
Yeah, it would have been interesting.
And I think he was interested for at least a time in that David J. Shaw cult of Freddy idea.
Well, that he probably, when he was involved at all on this, it probably would have been based more on those early scripts, you know?
I've got to ask you, what do you think about director Ronny Yu when it comes to what ended up on the screen in Freddy vs. Jason? Because I've got to tell you, I remember vividly seeing this movie at the Dedham Showcase Cinemas with our late friend Larry. And I actually remember there was a bit of a negative fan reaction because I remember a lot of people saying it was like almost like a kung fu movie. It was like, there were points where like Jason and Freddy are literally like karate fighting. And I actually remember a lot of venom going around in the fan community that when I was doing the research for this, I was actually surprised seems to have evaporated. Yeah. I don't see a lot of people saying much critical about Ronny Yu's kind of stylization that he chooses to apply to this film that is interestingly sort of connects back again to the past of Nightmare on Elm Street. If you think about Rennie Harlin, who directed Nightmare 4: The Dream Master, he was actually very, very inspired by Asian cinema when he set to make that film.
He had that whole scene, right, where the dude gets his butt kicked in the dojo and everything.
And if you look at The Bride with White Hair, the Ronny Yu film, it actually feels almost like a classic Nightmare on Elm Street sequel. Yeah. It has a lot of that same type of set-piece driven, dreamlike imagery that's all done practical and physical, that is like completely devoid of rules or physical rules, and is just like purely kind of dreamlike and fun.
Right. Ronny was offered this movie once, and he declined. They saw a bunch of other people, and they kind of circled back, and then, because they started doing the old like, well, what if we give you complete like creative control type of thing? And I don't think they gave him 100%, but they gave him a lot of control, which he liked. And so by the time they asked him a second time, he was coming around, and they had to woo him a little bit, and they talked him into it. And yes, I mean, the guy had a huge career in Hong Kong, so there's no way you're not going to get that influence in his movie. And although I don't really see it in the moves of the characters as much, but the shooting, the way the movie presents,
I think the lighting in this film is so it's so Freddy centric, but it's also very
it's character centric too.
Yes.
So there is if you're into this movie and you only are watching it streaming, I have to really highly recommend getting the Blu-ray because there are a lot of great extras, including commentary by Ronny Yu and Robert Englund and Ken Kersinger, which is great because, like I've complained in the past, most of these Nightmare movies don't have any commentaries at all. So to hear Robert Englund doing some commentary is great. Of course, he's known to be a storyteller, and boy, does he take over that commentary. He does not stop yapping, and it's great stuff, don't get me wrong. But the Blu-ray has a lot of just behind-the-scenes footage. And
that's great, because as we've mentioned many times in the past, it's amazing how little there is in terms of commentaries for previous Nightmare on Elm Street films.
This was great. There was hours. And then so what I started to learn and appreciate was watching what Ronny Yu did as a director to accomplish the different looks he was trying to do in the fight sequences, and it's great. It's just he's a really, he thinks out every scene. Every scene is planned. Every move, he knows everything he wants the characters to do, and he applies a lot of little technical things that you don't even realize, where they will shoot 20 frames a second instead of 24, so everything has a slightly sped up feel to it.
Right.
He does a lot of frame rate differences. The lighting, like you mentioned, will very harshly change from character to character depending on whose scene it sort of is, and that Hong Kong sensibility,
I think
it
the
really
style
adds to this without hitting you over the head.
I'm probably bastardizing the pronunciation here, but I know the style, the filmmaking style, I believe it's called a filmmaking style, that Ronny Yu studied within and certainly applied to many of his previous films before this. And certainly you can see it in Bride of Chucky, and you can see it in Freddy vs. Jason. It's called wuxia, WXWXIA. Wuxia. And a great example of that in film is the Ang Lee film Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. That's in that wuxia style. And seeing the application of that, or at least sort of like vestigial elements of that, kind of leaking into the DNA of slasher genre, is actually quite unusual, and that unusual feeling is exciting.
Yeah, so that's what
in terms of aesthetically.
When I go back to that, this movie is fun. That's what I mean. Can you seriously incorporate it into each character's timeline and feels good about it? No, not really. But if you can kind of take it as a one-off,
that's right, and that's what's so unique.
It's just supposed to be fun. It's I don't think,
like I said to you when I first got here, the interesting thing is that this film is not really a Nightmare on Elm Street film. It's not really a Friday the 13th film. It really almost exists outside of both of the franchises that it is actually celebrating.
However, but they give you a lot of anchors to the Nightmare movies more than
they
the Friday,
do,
especially the whole montage in the beginning, of all the films.
They do. I would agree with that, but I just also think it is aesthetically, ultimately, in my opinion, aesthetically divorced. Even on the Freddy side, where it's a little more closer, it's aesthetically, to me, divorced from the franchises it's connected to.
Sure.
I wouldn't know what to call this. I don't really consider this a Freddy movie or a Jason movie. It's specific to itself in that regard. It's like, I mentioned Batman versus Superman. Well, that movie, when it came out, the Zack Snyder film, it was actually intended as a Superman film.
Right.
Batman is appearing in a Superman film as far as Christopher Nolan, the producer, and Zack Snyder, the director, and Kurt Johnstadt, I believe, the writer, were concerned. And yet it's called Batman versus Superman because I think pop culturally that's how that proposed team-up was always referred to. But this really is kind of right in the middle of Freddy and Jason. They're both sort of anchoring the film by their sheer pop cultural presences.
I feel like we lean a little more towards Nightmare for this.
Because stylistically, yes, I agree.
And in fact, a lot of some of the earlier scripts were even called Nightmare X and all these different things.
And it has absolutely really nothing to do with a standard Jason film in terms of that grand Guignol approach of you have 10 teenagers who are going to die one by one in creative and classic ways.
It's a New Line Cinema film at the end of the day, and you just got to realize, of course, Freddy is gonna sort of be always portrayed a little more in a positive light and a little more in a. He's got the upper hand for a lot of the movie, despite where you might think the movie ends.
And as we watch the movie, I'm going to bring up a couple of points about why I'm not always crazy about the storytelling in this film, as much as I find the film ultimately very fun and entertaining.
Let's face it, it's fun because you want to see all the Freddy Jason stuff.
But there are storytelling and narrative developments in this film that I just find to be awkward.
See, what's interesting is I was watching last night, there are a lot of deleted scenes that are also on the Blu-ray, and you can watch them by themselves or with Ronny Yu's commentary. And listening to, him explain why this scene or that scene was cut out, it's really interesting, but there are a bunch of scenes where he just was like, oh, this was just cut for time, not needed, don't need it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at it going, oh my God. Like that, that would have been so much more helpful to have seen that in the movie. Or a couple times there were even scenes that I had thought like, oh, I'm surprised they didn't film this, and then all of a sudden there it is in the deleted scenes.
Right.
I am surprised sometimes at his willingness when you listen to he was just chopping scenes just because he felt like it was, just taking up too much time.
Before we jump into the film, I love to do this little quick, and we'll be brief here because I know Joe's sort of chomping at the bit here. He's sort of telling me let's.
I have a lot of stuff I want to bring up during the movie,
and I do too. But I think it's always fun to set the table and to take a look at the year 2003 when this film was released finally after decades, literally decades of development. let's take a look at the other horror films that populated 2003. I'm just going to go right down the list here as I'm reading them. We had the Platinum Dunes Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by Marcus Nispel.
Yep.
We've talked about that on Haddonfield Radio numerous places, numerous times. I'm sure you guys know my opinion. I am a fan of not only that film by Marcus Nispel, but generally all of the horror reimaginings that they provided, with the exception, the sterling exception of Nightmare 2010, which...
Yeah, Freddy vs. Jason is the last apparent or movies with the original versions of these characters before we start getting the reboots for all of them.
Right, that's exactly right. It's very interesting.
This is Robert Englund's last appearance as Freddy on film.
Right, in terms of the canon, in terms of the films. Yeah. We had Gothica, which, remember, it had Halle Berry. And I remember, if I'm kind of spitballing here, but I believe that was under the, what was it called? Dark House or something Dark something banner, and it was like they were releasing all these little mid-range budgeted horror films with like Robert Downey Jr. in them or Halle Berry. So I remember Gothica was pretty cool. Final Destination 2. Are you a fan of those movies?
I don't think I saw past 2, truthfully.
I find that the Final Destination movies are very interesting because they sort of emulate the Friday the 13th films in a way, where you have a group of characters who get picked off one by one, except the killer in those films. Some people see Tony Todd's character as the Grim Reaper. I tend to think of Tony Todd's character in those films more of as fate or entropy. More so fate. Fate is the easier... or I think the better word. That's just my opinion. Am I crazy about the Final Destination movies? I don't think I've seen enough of them to say I'm crazy or not.
Maybe I have to revisit them. At the time, they weren't grabbing me enough to want to keep up.
Next up, we have one of my favorite films, certainly in my top 20 of all time, the Alex Garland and Danny Boyle collaboration, 28 Days Later.
Yeah, and they're making another one, right?
Right now, it's 28 years later, that reunites screenwriter Alex Garland, director Danny Boyle, and even Cillian Murphy.
I know. I think it's amazing that they got him back, in that he doesn't feel too big to...
He just won the Oscar for Oppenheimer.
Come back to like do a zombie type movie, you know?
Well, that's funny you say that, because I never consider 28 Days Later a zombie film.
I said zombie type movie.
Thank you. All right, that's true. It's more of an... I just want to say I'm just being an asshole.
No, I know.
No. I totally call it a zombie film. I'm just being a wise ass. Of course it's a zombie film. Anybody that wants to argue that is a nerd.
It's their own take of it.
Some people say it's under the infected subgenre.
Exactly. I don't know.
Or the viral subgenre, viral end of the world. But it's a zombie movie.
Pretty much a zombie.
28 Days Later is a zombie movie. Period. Okay? Put that to bed. Jeepers Creepers 2. Of course, the extremely controversial director Victor Salva, who was revealed to be a pedophile.
Yeah.
And yet, I think to this day, continues to direct films.
Yeah.
So it gives you a sense of the value system of Hollywood. And I won't put too fine of a point on that. Let's see. Oh, the Stephen King adaptation, Dreamcatcher. Now, it was directed by the writer of Empire Strikes, Lawrence Kasdan.
Right.
And at the time that it was released, it was considered a huge commercial and critical bomb of like the highest order. And to this day, it's sort of looked at as a goof of a movie, even though the pedigree of that film and all the actors in it, the filmmakers behind it, based on the Stephen King novel, you'd think you're going to get something good. But, the original novel Dreamcatcher has such a funny origin. Stephen King wrote that book simply because one day he went into the bathroom in the morning to take a dump, and when he stood up, there was blood in the bowl. And that terrified him in such a primal level that it became the novel Dreamcatcher. And if you think of the book, and especially the movie, there is a sequence involving a toilet in the movie in particular that obviously came out of Stephen King's experience with the blood in the bowl. That's got to be the best scene in the movie, and makes the movie worth checking out if you haven't seen it. It's also one of the strangest performances of Morgan Freeman's career, and he wears the strangest eyebrows you will ever see in a character in motion picture history. So, Dreamcatcher. What's next? Darkness Falls. I believe that's Jonathan Liebsman is the director, and I believe it's essentially a oh my God, the Tooth Fairy is a monster movie.
Gotcha.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that's the hook. I could be wrong. Eli Roth's Cabin Fever, the debut of one of my favorite directors, Eli Roth. He's fallen on a little bit of hard times recently in a 2024 prism because he just released Borderlands, which was utterly savaged by critics and audiences. But I believe it's probably one of those movies 20 years from now will be like a cult classic.
Sure, of course.
And I trust Eli Roth's sensibilities. I wasn't crazy about Thanksgiving, but I bet Thanksgiving 2 is going to be insanely good. That's my prediction. So we had Cabin Fever. Did you ever see that?
I don't think so.
You got to watch that. That's a gnarly, what I would call the type of film like a squirm movie.
I'm also really bad at associating titles with movies. I'll often think like I haven't seen that based on the title, and then it comes on and I'm like, oh, that movie.
Cabin Fever, real quick, was about the horny teens. They rent the cabin in the woods. It's almost like the Evil Dead cabin.
Dead, it sounds like.
And you're almost thinking maybe that's what this movie's going to be. Well, no. There's a water, way nearby the cabin that gets polluted with a virus, and then they all get the virus, and it's a flesh-eating virus. And with Eli Roth's directing, you can imagine what comes from that idea, and it is as gnarly as it gets. There's a scene with the girl shaving her legs, like a girl would shave her legs, but all the layers of skins coming off.
Maybe I did see. I don't know.
It's gnarly.
Yeah.
It's gnarly. It's really good. Another one of my favorites of this era, Wrong Turn. Oh my God. If there's a guy out there that loves inbred horror movies more than me, I'd like to meet him, because I love the Wrong Turn movies. And that's one of those movies, as the sequels went on, they got cheaper and goofier, and yet somehow more and more entertaining. And there's some really well-regarded kills in that franchise, and a lot of just entertaining stuff, including, I think part 2 stars Henry Rollins, and he's so over the top as to almost like you wonder if he knew what movie he was in, but worth seeing. What's next? House of a Thousand Corpses, the debut, of course, in terms of filmmaking, of Rob Zombie, who at that time was probably more well-known as the lead singer of White Zombie.
Yeah,
he was directing his own music videos.
Well, he was offered Freddy vs. Jason.
Rob Zombie?
Yeah, but he turned it down because he was working on that, House of a Thousand Corpses.
Interesting to me, there's a lot of debuts of really well-regarded horror directors in 2003. Let's see, we've got House of the Dead. House of the Dead. Is that the Ty West movie? Or no, that's House of the Devil. House of the Dead, not quite sure about that one.
No.
Gonna have to look that up. The Order, I believe that is the Heath Ledger film. It was not well received, didn't make much money, and to be quite honest, I think it was one of those films that's like a kind of religious conspiracy horror film, I believe, with Heath Ledger. Again, maybe I'm wrong. Willard. Oh,
Crispin Glover, right?
Crispin Glover, and it was written and directed by two of the most notable writers from the X-Files.
Oh, okay.
And one of them is Asian, and they were partners, and damn it if I can't remember.
James Wang. Or Wang or Wang.
We sound like we sound totally racist.
No,
right now.
no, I'm telling you, it's something like that. But you know,
I'm going to tell you right now because I like to say people's names.
It's interesting that also in 2003, Alien, the original Alien, had a re-release, and was back in theaters for a little while and made a little bit more money. Didn't really break the top 10, but it's in that list of the top
Darren
5.
Morgan and James Wong.
James Wong. Okay,
yes.
yeah.
And I actually think that remake of Willard, simply due to the fact of the perfect casting of Crispin Glover, and I remember that movie having some money behind it because those writers were coming off of X-Files, and basically they were getting blank. Anyone from X-Files was getting blank check movie careers. Yeah. Rob Bowman, he went on to do Reign of Fire, that dragon movie. Ooh, look at this. The Ring.
The Ring.
Gore Verbinski's The Ring, of course.
Big.
I'm blanking on, I'm going to say, look his name, the original director of the original Ring. I want to look up his name. Yeah, of course, because
this was an Americanized
This was the American version of the Japanese film.
Yeah.
Can you vamp for a second while I look up his name?
Well, I'm also looking on the list over here. Ghost Ship and They. Do you remember They? Wasn't that have something to do with Wes Craven?
He was he basically shepherded it.
Right.
And it was under his Wes Craven Presents label.
And
much like that film, Dracula 2000.
Right.
And a lot of these were people like Patrick Lussier, who had come up like editing for Wes Craven.
Yeah.
So he was helping them, shepherding them into directing careers.
And of course, Wes Craven was asked to, come back for Freddy versus Jason, but he was very vocal once he knew about the idea and saying that he thought it was awful that they were doing it, and it was just a big, sellout, basically.
The director of the original Japanese 1998 version of The Ring was Hideo Nakata. I just wanted to make sure. Credit where credit is due.
Nice.
I will say, I actually find the Gore Verbinski, the Naomi Watts version from 2003, I think it's way scarier. I think the original Ring, actually, The Ring 2 is pretty damn scary too. But The Ring, come on guys, am I wrong? I think The Ring is pretty damn scary. And I watched it within, the last couple of years, and it holds up.
Yeah, it gives you the goosebumps.
Samara is one of the most underappreciated horror icons. I think that character is so, recognizable, and yet you don't really hear her brought up in the modern pantheon conversation of kind of horror icons, and she should be in that conversation. Any other ones? Let's see.
No, that's what I was listening.
Ghost Ship. I remember Ghost Ship. I think that also was on that Dark House banner.
Yeah.
And I remember it was pretty cool. They did that one where in the wax, with what's her name? She was the reality star with the blonde hair, and she was really ditzy. Hilton.
Jessica Simpson.
Paris Hilton was in this one about the wax.
Yes, that's right.
The wax museum. I can't think of what it. House of Wax.
House of Wax. Yep.
Another one of those. Yep. Well, anyway, so 2003 was not a bad horror year.
Mm-hmm.
A number of films in 2003 that I think of fondly to this day.
And I believe Jason X actually came out in 2002. But it sat around for 2 years. It was supposed to come out in 2000. So it's weird that you get
2001.
2001.
But
there
still,
you go. So you get future Jason before this Jason. You know what I'm saying? It kind of also proves that this Jason is sort of its own thing.
I'm really kind of glad that you just brought that point up, because I hadn't considered the fact that it's interesting that Jason as a character was still so in the public pop cultural consciousness. His films were still being released. Yeah. When you think it had been since 1994 since we had seen Freddy, almost a decade.
And it's interesting.
By 2003.
One of the things I picked up on about the Friday the 13th series was that there's at a certain point in the later movies, they lose the rights. Go back from Paramount to, I think, Cunningham and a few other guys. And at that point, if you notice, the movies aren't called Friday the 13th anymore. It's Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X.
Right.
So
they sort of just dropped the Roman numerals.
I don't think they could.
Yeah.
I think there was something going on there where
That's got to be something in that convoluted rights.
Anyway.
So before we jump into the movie, the reason why you guys are all here to watch Ronny Yu's 2003 film, Freddy vs. Jason with Joe and I just want to quickly say a couple of things that are very important to both Joe and myself. So it bears repeating. If you are taking time out of your busy lives and your busy schedule to listen to Joe and I right now talking about the convoluted history of Freddy vs. Jason, and real quick tangent, I think convoluted might be my overused word of this episode. Yeah. Every episode there's an overused word. It might be convoluted. Mike Lesko, if you're out there, when you make your next amazing Haddonfield Radio bingo card, maybe convoluted will end up on one of those squares.
Word of the day, maybe.
I just want to say a quick shout out, Mike Lesko. If you haven't seen on our Instagram page,
hilarious.
One of our listeners, Mike Lesko, he created a Haddonfield Radio bingo card that really made me belly laugh. Yeah. And also touched my heart.
Yeah.
It was very touching.
I guess I'm the grumpy guy who doesn't like things sometimes. Is what I'm picking up on here. But anyway.
It was very thoughtful to do that.
We love you guys. Everybody. Yeah. Everyone who reaches out. Everybody who messages. Everybody who makes art for us. Everybody.
And that's why I take time, and Joe and I both take time every episode at this point, just to make sure you guys know how much we sincerely appreciate your support of our creativity here at Haddonfield Radio. We are literally doing this show and these shows simply to reach out to you guys and to share our fan experience with other fans. Like we always say, we are obviously clearly not experts. Clearly. And you may disagree with many
Speak
of our
for
points
yourself.
of view. There you go.
I'm kidding.
But you may have already said to yourself, why does this asshole think Tom Savini created Jason? What an idiot. You may very well be in your
Stick
rights to
with
think
us.
that, okay? And again, all of those points I was making then, I'm just setting the table for what might be coming in the future.
And hey, if everybody noticed on Instagram, the ad we had for this show coming up, some beautiful artwork, the half and half Jason Freddy face.
Oh, what a great ad that was.
That's from Mike Haddonfield, who was one of our listeners, and he's pretty much a member of the team now, and he's doing a lot of great art for us.
And you have to understand.
So keep your eyes open for that as we put out ads, because it's beautiful, unique, original art.
Mike does this literally out of the kindness of his heart, and because he is such like a tried and true, dyed-in-the-wool horror geek like the rest of us, that he has donated beautiful artwork to our show and to help promote our show, more of which you're going to see coming soon in the future.
Yeah.
But it's stuff like that. Look, we don't have the most subscribers in the world. We don't get the most views in the world. There's probably YouTubers that would look at our channel at face value, just look at the page and would just snicker at most of our videos don't even have 1,000 views. And you know what? Joe and I we could not, I should say, care less. The fact that you guys are out there right now listening, that is why we do it. I said to Joe earlier today, I would rather have 1,500 subscribers that really are enjoying what we're doing than a million ambiguous people that just subscribe for no
just
reason.
Numbers, yeah. But
I don't care about that stuff. We're not trying to make money. Joe, you're never going to hear about a Patreon page, or you're never going to hear Joe and I e-begging or asking you to donate to our PayPal because we're doing this in our own free time. No. Joe and I both have careers and lives that pay the bills. We do this for one reason. We are fans of movies and movie history, and we want to share our perspective with other fans in a positive way. That's it. We've been doing creative projects together, as we've mentioned before, for literally 30 years. And I have to say, of all the things we've done over the years, Haddonfield Radio has provided me more happiness, stability, both psychologically and just fundamental stability, than maybe any other project I've ever been involved with.
it's the most rewarding, for sure.
This has been so rewarding.
For sure.
And to know that we're only just getting started, and we're only just getting going with what we want to do with this channel. So I just want you to know we love you guys, literally love you guys, and literally appreciate you more than you know. And appreciate your support and your kindness and your artwork and your talent, and more than anything, your knowledge. You guys have enlightened us so many times in the comment section, and we look forward to that.
Yeah.
And corrected us times that we really look forward to.
I actually have something really cool I'm going to bring up in our live stream that's coming up in the beginning of September that all came from comments I saw just recently on one of our videos, and it led to something really cool, but I'm saving it for the live stream.
Listen, we really evolve and develop this show as we go episode to episode, a lot of which based on what we hear from you guys and what we pick up on from the Instagram conversations and YouTube conversations. And we really take those things to heart because we are literally creating this for you. If there's a way we could be making this show more entertaining to you or more palatable to you, just let us know. And we'll include it.
I will fire Christian immediately.
That
Somebody
will probably
just
be
say
it.
it. Just say
get rid of me and I'll be gone.
Send me a private message.
And then you won't have to worry about me spending potentially season 3 trying to make the point that Tom Savini is the creator of Jason. I have a feeling I'm going to be towing that line for a while now. But anyway.
No, I can't wait to research
all
it.
I was doing in the beginning of this episode is just setting the table for what might be coming. Yeah. So, anything else you would like to
let's
add?
get to it.
Without any further ado, we're going to jump right in to one of both my and Joe's favorite films, really probably of either of these franchises, certainly one of the most fun films of either of these franchises, Ronny Yu's 2003 film, Freddy vs. Jason. Let's do it.
All right, and here we go. We're starting the movie. I love the way they combined the themes here in the beginning.
It's actually very creative, and it's a good starting point because I actually think the music. Who did the music for this movie? Do you have it written down somewhere here?
Yep.
Graham Revel. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Very respected composer. I like the music in this film, and that has not been the case for all of the Nightmare films.
And I don't think he actually does that a lot, like combining the themes. I don't know if it happens much more than right there in the beginning.
It's sort of the perfect place to do it.
And then it's sort of like he does his own stuff for the rest of the movie, which is also probably good to do, because otherwise he'd be teetering back and forth, the whole movie. Friday 13th music, Nightmare music, this theme, that theme,
Now here we are, we're beginning the story, the narrative of Freddy vs. Jason. Obviously it starts with Freddy. So what that is telling you as an audience member is the perspective that we're going to be following here is most likely going to be Freddy's perspective.
Yeah, it's also...
It's a choice.
Well, do you think that they're also feeling that in the year now with 2003 that they're so far removed from the originals that they have to kind of reintroduce his storyline to younger kids that are...
Can I give you my honest opinion of why this scene exists the way it does in this film? I think by this point Robert Englund had enough clout and enough say-so in terms of the production of this movie to demand to be seen within this film as himself.
And this is awesome.
Amazing.
Freddy.
Demon Freddy makeup design that you see in behind-the-scenes photographs through the development process that I think is quite unique and scary.
I think it's amazing in the beginning that they... they don't tempt themselves or us with the full reveal either. You just get these eyes, and you probably know it's not quite right. And then you'll see it pop up again a little bit towards the end. And Robert Englund kept saying in the commentary that was like when Freddy is really, really mad, that the demon comes out. That's when you see the sharp teeth and the contacts and all that. When Freddy really is losing control of his own self, sort of,
It's interesting to note that by 2003, now I don't have exact numbers here, but by 2003, the Friday the 13th franchise and the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise were fairly neck and neck in terms of their box office that they've made. I think they were both around, the $250 million mark by 2003, which is nothing to slouch about, you know what I mean?
That's why they keep making these movies. They're making people money.
It's unbelievable by 2003 when you see the absolute, what the slasher subgenre had become.
Now, I want to point out that opening that we just saw with Freddy's History was not the original opening. This was. We actually started on sort of like a wide shot of Camp Crystal Lake, and we started with her in a cabin with kids.
Well, that is so interesting because that, again, what I was just saying about perspective.
Right.
They must not have wanted the audience to be seeing Jason as their surrogate.
Well, no, sort of. They just said it was a clunky start, that you didn't know if we were in reality, if we were in dreams, that,
I just thought of something.
Yeah.
You know what I think I would have done? I would have, just like the music's mixed, the themes are mixed at the beginning, I would have started with something like this.
Go back and forth.
That becomes a dream.
Yeah.
It's this iconography that's connected to Jason's history, and yet you find out you're in a nightmare and you're actually in Freddy's territory.
It was actually very funny because it was supposed to be reality, not a dream either. And in the beginning, she's trying to leave the cabin, and one of the little boys gets up and is like, "Don't go, I'm scared." And she's kind of yells at him, is like, "Go back to bed, you little creep." And he does, and he's all freaked out. Now later, when she's getting chased by Jason, she runs back to the cabin, the door is locked, and the little kid is just looking at her through the window, and she's like, open it up, and he just flips the bird off to her. Right? And then she turns.
I kind of like that.
And then the scene ends when she does a big gasp because Jason was actually going to kill her at the cabin, not here. So it's interesting. And they said it was just too long without any real characters that the audience could associate with, that it didn't... People were just disoriented in where they were supposed to be,
But
starting
yet,
it off here.
the way they do it in the film here.
Yeah.
You essentially get the exact opening Freddy scene you would expect, followed by the exact opening Jason scene you expect. I just feel like it lacks the oomph of having gone in a less predictable way.
Right.
But I want to say something about the makeup design that Ken Kersinger wears in this film.
Sure.
I actually like that bloated, blackened skin that Jason has in this film. In that he almost looks sort of like a desiccated mummy, like an Egyptian mummy.
Mm-hmm.
When you see them unwrap a real like Egyptian mummy, they have that almost like solid black skin.
Yep.
So I kind of think it's kind of neat.
The thing, my nitpick, is that Ken's neck, to me, is too long.
Oh, absolutely.
Jason's
I agree with that.
head just doesn't seem to sit on the body the way this is a lanky sort of Jason.
But do you think that's
He's tall.
because when you picture Jason in your mind, is it because you're picturing the stockier Kane Hodder incarnation?
I think so. Yeah.
Because Kane Hodder has he holds his shoulders
He's
up.
taller than you think, though. Kane Hodder's 6'2", and this guy was like 6'5". Oh, it's only a 3-inch difference.
No, I
You
would
know?
not.
But
I am not.
But
at
this
all,
guy seems so much bigger.
I am not at all ever trying to make the point. Even earlier when I was saying Kane Hodder might have been a better physical match for Robert Englund. I'm not saying he's diminutive.
No. I know.
Yeah.
It's just, but
It's in his posturing.
But it was a
as
main
Jason.
reason why New Line wanted somebody else. They wanted a bigger Jason. You know what I mean? That's what
Right.
they were trying to do. I should also point out that the mother there, Jason's mom, they did try to get the original actress
Betsy
back.
Palmer?
But she felt the role wasn't big enough and they weren't going to pay her enough. So
Well,
she said no.
that's smart.
Yeah.
I will say that she had a lot of other opportunities. I'm sure. Her agent was calling her so often she had to leave the phone off the hook. That was actually Paula Shaw was that actor, and I think she does a perfectly serviceable job. The Pamela Voorhees for comparison in the 2009 Friday the 13th I think is bad. It doesn't work for me. This one works.
I believe, from Star Trek. But anyway.
Wait, say that again?
I believe
that's
the mom
right.
is the new mom. It was Nana
From the
Visitor
2009?
from Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Now, this is, of course, Kelly Rowland, who is most known from Destiny's Child. And Catherine Isabel was one of those other actors right there. Catherine Isabel.
Really quick, I back up one sec
Yep.
before I go too far past it. That scene of Jason being resurrected was supposed to be in homage and done sort of the same way when Freddy gets reresurrected.
When the dog pees on him?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it.
It was in that scene.
It's not direct enough to be an Easter egg, but I see it.
But that's what... So there's a lot of little things in this movie that I was surprised when I read. It's like, oh my God, oh yeah. And that was like one of them. And it was, done practically. The movie has a fair amount of CG effects, right? And sometimes they're a little cringy.
Yeah.
It was 2003.
I mean, that's the era. And especially considering that as a New Line Cinema production, I can guarantee you, what was the budget on this? $30 million? Pretty frugal for this film.
Right.
Such a huge film with such big box office potential.
Yep.
$30 million is a very frugal investment, which is right in line with New Line Cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Right in line, as we all know. But hey, that's how they became New Line Cinema. That's how they banked so much capital, was not overspending on their productions.
But it's amazing that you have Sean Cunningham, with the success of Friday the 13th movies behind you and New Line Cinema. You think it would kind of, whatever we have to put into it to make this work, if you think it's worth it. But
I'm not going to start my Sean S. Cunningham rant now.
No, okay.
But it's hard for me to align a lot of ownership over this character or this series, when it comes to Sean S. Cunningham in my mind.
But he sort of shepherded the
Of
franchise.
course. Oh, yes, I give him that respect.
And you got to remember his tie to the original Nightmare, where he came in to help his buddy Wes Craven.
Yep.
And
Last House on the Left.
Second unit stuff to get the movie done, in time.
No, they were basically partners.
See, that would have been great if for some reason Wes was into this, if you had them sort of back together doing the final one and all that.
And it wouldn't have been an impossibility to have lured Wes Craven into this project of Freddy vs. Jason. I mean, look,
he also felt a little slighted that they were doing more after he did New Nightmare, and kind of
and
felt
he had reestablished Freddy in a new way.
And sort of thought he wrapped it up. Sort of like had come full circle to him, and he was able to reinvent Freddy a little bit.
I think it's because New Nightmare was considered a box office disappointment.
Yeah.
And maybe that, colored the atmosphere for both the producers and Wes Craven in his involvement.
Another fun fact, the friend who's actually not pictured right here in the scene, the girl who's...
Catherine Isabel.
Who's upstairs with the hat. Mm-hmm. That she's wearing a red hat in homage to PJ Soul's character from Carrie.
Oh.
Who,
well... I know
wore the hat the whole time.
If you have your Haddonfield Radio bingo card ready, I actually have had a bit of a crush on Catherine Isabel. She was in one of my favorite movies of the 90s called Ginger Snaps,
right?
Which is a werewolf movie about these two sisters that in werewolves. And you've probably seen this movie.
Yeah, Ronny Yu.
She's excellent, and she's a great actor. She's really good in that movie.
Ronny Yu talks about that movie and Insomnia. She was in Insomnia.
Yeah.
As sort of why he wanted her and that energy. I think she originally tried out for the main role, but then he was like, your energy's really much better for this friend and everything.
She really gives that like teenage energy. Like she has that, she knows how to play that role. Like she knows how to play that archetype perfectly. Now I think Kelly Rowland, obviously she was a very big name at 2003.
Yeah.
She was part of one of the biggest like pop groups there was at the time, Destiny's Child.
Yeah.
But what all of that can't buy you and can't provide you with is talent in terms of
acting.
The charisma it takes to be a film actor in particular.
Yeah.
Now, I think if you put Kelly Rowland on a Broadway stage, she's going to fall apart too. But she really has a kind of shocking lack of charisma, in my opinion.
Yep.
And I would almost bet they probably wanted to get Beyonce to play that role at that time.
Yeah.
As the leader of Destiny's Child, and probably ended up with Kelly Rowland. Now, I'm being facetious. I think what really happened is Kelly Rowland was the member of that band at that time that was trying to develop an acting career.
Yeah.
So there you go. As we talked about before we started recording, we'll get to it when it happens, but she has perhaps the cringiest moment in this entire film.
Right. And back to the girl upstairs. I keep forgetting the actress's name.
Catherine Isabel.
Catherine Isabel. So the later scene where she does a shower scene nude, Ronny Yu was really kind of, it wasn't in the script. And then she wasn't happy about doing it. And he kind of kept pressuring her, and she said no, and they get a body double. And then apparently from that point on, they had a very strained relationship on set.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah,
that tracks.
This would have been the scene.
And it fits with like the history of the making of all these types of films.
So that's not her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I now have a crush on whoever that is too, to be honest with you.
So yeah, I don't know if I want to call that a fun fact, but it's a fact.
I had fun with that fact, I will admit. I'm not afraid to admit. Now, I like that they chose essentially a version of the Friday the 13th Part 3 mask. The original Jason mask with the 3 red triangles.
Yeah.
Now, vamp for a minute.
A lot of his kills too are kind of replicated kills from his various movies, and there were in one of the original scripts. Before they went to Goyer and combined things, they were actually going to have the character of Tommy Jarvis back.
Oh wow!
Right, and it was going to be played by Jason Bateman.
Wait a minute!
Yeah, but then
they were going to have the character of Tommy Jarvis played by Jason Bateman in this movie?
Yeah, Tommy Jarvis and a girl named Jenny were 2 characters that were eliminated, and they, and Jarvis was one of the few surviving victims of Jason's, and they had Jason Bateman, I guess, lined up before they cut the character.
This, of course, is one of the most notable kind of actors of that generation, Lachlan Monroe. He's one of those actors that's one of those quote-unquote that guy actors that appears in many movies and TV shows. A lot of people, you don't know his name as a performer, but everybody recognizes his face.
I should know this, but what year did Scream come out?
1996.
Okay, so yeah, this is very reminiscent of the Dewey role to me, this guy, you know what I mean?
Oh, there are a lot of elements that are influences of the Scream era of horror in Freddy vs. Jason, because let's face it, that's what worked.
Yeah.
And this is the tail end of that little chapter of horror history that Kevin Williamson, all the actors are from CW TV shows. They're all, hot up and coming teenage actors. And this film certainly is that. But that's what the slasher subgenre is going back to its, infancy, just generationally. I just wanted to throw a quick fun fact again about that mask. That original mask from Friday the 13th Part 3 was discovered by Friday the 13th Part 3 3D effects supervisor Martin J. Sadoff. And he was a hockey fan. He actually had hockey gear with him, and he's the one who pulled out a Detroit Red Wings hockey mask for a lighting test, which Friday the 13th Part 3 director Steve Miner loved. And this is basically a recreation or an homage to that original mask. So I kind of appreciate that.
Sure.
Because it ties back to the original mask Jason wore.
Supposedly the director, Bryan Singer...
Oh boy.
I know, but at the time...
Oh boy, very controversial.
Yeah. At the time, though, he was, the It Man from the X-Men and whatnot.
He, if you don't know, Bryan Singer, he directed The Usual Suspects. He did some of the X-Men films, Superman Returns, and then found himself in a lot of hot water professionally and personally, and you don't really hear from him anymore. Go ahead.
He stopped. He's like a professed sort of Friday the 13th expert fan, huge,
I did not know that.
And he came to the set and was like raving about the makeup for Jason in this, saying like they had finally nailed it. It was perfect. It was great. He was going on and on and on about it. And
would you say you do not agree with that sentiment?
I don't think it's bad. I just it's a good Jason makeup, but like I said, just Ken's overall build, it kind of, I just know it's not the same guy, the same Jason. Something
that has always struck me as kind of funny when you think about the physicality in the portrayals of Jason over the years, and how all the different actors that played Jason sort of played very different versions of Jason, whether it's Warrington, Gillette in Part 2, and there's a stunt performer in Part 2 that did like 50% of it, and I'll get his name in a minute. Or, like I said, Ted White or Kane Hodder, and they all bring this different physicality. One thing I always thought was so funny and interesting about Kane Hodder is when you think of Kane Hodder's Jason, you picture Jason doing that breathing with the shoulders going up and down. And how weird to think that Kane Hodder is playing the version of Jason that's dead. Why is his signature... If he's prime
moment,
zombie
right?
Jason,
guess,
then why is his signature physical prowess breathing? That's what Kane Hodder made his signature.
We know about reality. Don't mess with the fantasy.
I know. And I'm not picking on Kane Hodder. I know everybody loves Kane Hodder, and I do too. But Ted White's my Jason.
This movie was filmed in Canada. And so the Nightmare on Elm Street house is, it's not the original house. It is a real house that looks a lot like it, and they dressed it. It wasn't like a set. But because they were filming this movie, first nightmare movie, quote-unquote nightmare movie, to be filmed in Canada. But that's, the house is close, but not the exact same thing from the originals. And this movie had so many different beginnings and all sorts of weird ways it was going to start. At one point, they were going to have it start in medieval times. And then...
Wow. Well, that it's funny because that immediately called to mind the Evil Dead franchise, and how unique and interesting that they eventually tied Freddy and Jason together with the Evil Dead franchise.
With the success of this, they
almost were going to make it Freddy versus Jason versus Ash.
Yeah, and instead they turned it into a comic book series when things couldn't get really worked out. But they were
in that the original run of that comic book series is actually quite good.
Yeah,
and Yet that doesn't mean, even as a straight one-to-one adaptation, it would have made a good film. I actually think Freddy versus Jason versus Ash is just, even for me as someone who loves all those characters, I think it's a step too far. I just think it's a bit of a step too far for me personally as a fan.
Again, if they had done it well, it would have started, a chain reaction of more of these movies pitting, people together. In fact, one of the endings, I think they were going to have like Pinhead show up at the end of this one, to settle the fight or something like that.
See, Pinhead is who I think they should have pitted Freddy against. I think Freddy and Pinhead would have made an interesting collaboration, for lack of a better word.
I do like that shadow effect, and of course, the goat was an homage to Wes Craven's. Homage to, I think, Polanski in his original movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think about the Freddy makeup in Freddy vs. Jason?
I really like it.
One of the things I like is the way the nose burns kind of drift up to become almost like eyebrows.
I think I've picked up on the internet that a lot of fans don't dig it.
No, a lot of people do not like it.
Right.
Yeah, I saw that too.
And I don't mind it. I think it's a... He feels like Freddy. There's nothing weird about it, and I know I can tell it's different, but I like it. It still seems like him,
Oh yeah. See, right there is one of the things where I could point out where Ken Kersinger just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Did you just see the sort of lack of enthusiasm in the way he lifted the machete, that it didn't even feel like it would have had any ability to even cut through the severed head, never mind the person holding the severed head?
Yeah.
Now, think about again, I call to mind like Derek Mears in the 2009 version. There's a moment where he's running up on a girl on the ground, and as he's running, he's swinging the machete, Derek Mears, and it is so brutal, violent, has so much kinetic energy. Ken Kersinger just has no kinetic energy as Jason in this film.
Gotta stop you really quick. The TV in the background had the call letters Kruger, which were the same call letters that Johnny Depp heard when he was listening to the radio in the first movie.
Oh my God.
The other tie-in is right now they're at the sanitarium Weston Hills, which is the birthplace of Freddy that they showed us in Nightmare 3.
Oh my God, that is really cool, and I did not pick up on that.
Yep.
Can I throw a fun fact out?
Go for it.
The character we see on screen right now, one of them, the character Will Rollins, is played by actor Jason Ritter, who you see still to this day popping up in movies and especially television shows as an actor. Very successful career. Well, his father is actually one of my favorite actors of all time, John Ritter.
Yeah, he looks so much like him,
yeah.
too. I can't help but see it all the time. And he wasn't cast till 1 week before shooting.
Yeah, he had absolutely no time to prepare. Not that you needed a tense amount of time to prepare. But
they had somebody else lined up, I forget who, and then he dropped out. So they got him, but he had already tried out. Ritter had already tried out, Jason Ritter, and they said no. And then they kind of went back to him after the other guy dropped out.
I have to tell you, Three's Company holds such a place in my heart. What did you remember? Did you watch that growing up?
Oh God, yes.
Man, I still think you want to talk about Christian's crushes.
Let's go meet at the Regal Beagle, baby.
Perhaps one of my top 5 greatest, biggest, most long-lasting crushes was Suzanne Summers. In Three's Company. I can't even continue this, or I'll be back in 15 minutes.
Daniel Harris and Suzanne Summers.
If I could have Daniel Harris on one arm, Suzanne Summers on another arm.
Everybody pull out your bingo card.
Lauren
and mark off Daniel
Rivera
Harris
on yet another arm. I would be very, very pleased with myself.
Now,
hey, look, if you're going to have female nudity, it's only fair to have some male nudity. So it's only fair. Am I right?
Oh, yeah.
He had a very hairy rear end for a Hollywood actor. I just want to throw out there. That's part of my commentary. I got a quick fun fact.
Go for it.
Aside from Ari Lehman, who I mentioned earlier, who played the original childhood version of Jason in the 1980 film Friday the 13th, a couple other actors have also played childhood versions of Jason. Timothy Burr Merkovich in Friday Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. That actually is one of the creepiest scenes in the entire franchise.
At the end, right? In the
when
subway?
they're down in it's either the subway or the sewer.
Or something like that,
And the toxic waste is melts Jason. And his childhood version of himself comes out and says, like, Mommy. And it's so creepy.
But it kind of sets up the scene in this movie, why people are able to accept that once the water hits him, we also get child version of Jason.
And that
Freddy
is the
takes,
other one. Spencer Stump is the actor that played the childhood Jason in this film, Freddy vs. Jason.
And of course, there's a huge plot point here, which comes from the older Nightmare movies. We just saw the father putting in Hypnosil into her drink.
Which is so part and parcel in the history of the Nightmare films, and the way parents are always portrayed in those films, as they're always trying to subvert the teen's ability to stay awake. They're almost always under some sort of subliminal control of Freddy.
And it's a little, it's kind of crazier in this movie, because what the parents and the law officials are doing is kids who do dream about Freddy, they go to the asylum. So they can be forced to take the Hypnosil and not dream. And then, of course, law enforcement's also going around, and they've erased all traces of Freddy in the town.
Wow.
And so they're using the Hypnosil to try and control the patients, because they're people who dream of Freddy. And then the fun fact here is that actually comes directly from Nightmare 3. And there's a line where Heather Langenkamp's Nancy says to the doctor, like, maybe we should start giving the patients Hypnosil so they don't dream about Freddy.
Oh, geez, that's cool.
Because she was the one who had it. It was like a new and controversial, remember, and the doctor saw it.
Yep.
And so, that's where the whole idea was introduced. And here it's just, a huge plot point.
I got a quick little fun fact that connects to some of the conversation we were having earlier in the episode. I meant to bring up earlier because it's interesting. If you remember when I was talking about the origins of Freddy, I mentioned David A. Miller, how he was the special effects makeup artist that essentially originally designed Freddy's makeup for the first film. And he was working on Nightmare on Elm Street and the film Night of the Comet at the same time. An interesting fun fact is ultimately A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984 and Night of the Comet from 1984 that Miller did the effects for both films. They opened on the same day.
Well, yeah.
They opened on the exact same day. It was like November 11th, 1984, if I'm not incorrect. I'm telling you, I thought that was very interesting. What a year for David A. Miller.
Uh-huh. And I don't know if we just missed it, but there's a scene, one of these school scenes, actually I think it's coming up later on, where you get a walk-on role in the background of a young Evangeline Lilly.
Is in the background of this film?
Yeah, it hasn't come up yet, so I'll point it out when we see her, because...
and that had to be, had to be right around the time of Lost.
It's right before it, probably.
Let me see when Lost premiered. Because that's...
Yeah, it would have been a few years later.
Which means she probably must have auditioned at some point for a role in this film.
Right.
Would you? Think?
I wouldn't doubt it. If the scene, I was looking down at my notes, we might have missed it.
Lost premiered in 2004. Right. 1 year later.
Right. Yeah. She's wearing green sleeves and a coat in the background, right behind the main people.
Oh, yep. I'm looking on Reddit. I'm looking at the image of her right now.
It's coming up. It's going to be right now. It's going to be.
She has like lime green sleeves.
She's right there. She's right there.
Oh my God! It's Evangeline Lilly.
There she is. Yeah.
And she's in. She looks exactly like Kate from Lost.
Even blurred out, you can tell it's her.
It's right? Kate. It's Kate. There's Kate. There she is.
Yeah.
You want to talk about Christian's crushes? Kate from Lost, Evangeline Lilly from Lost. Oh my God, look at her.
Yo,
you can't miss her.
Focus. Yeah. Yep.
And she's really selling her emotion in this background face. She's really selling the emotion there.
We might have to add her to the bingo card. I don't know. I didn't realize you have a lot of crushes. Is what I'm learning.
It ended up on a bingo card. Clearly, I'm talking about crushes and too much. And maybe it's because I'm a lonely 49-year-old incel. That's probably why. It's probably why.
They filming for this movie only lasted 53 days, which is really short kind of for a major motion picture. And a lot of that was because of Ronny Yu's team of, he brought in
he had like a full second unit and stunt team.
Right. And
he
were
specific to that wuxia style of how stunts and fight choreography was performed. Of course, Robert Shea.
Yep, and he had a much longer scene too that was cut out and is in the deleted scenes.
Well,
but
if you've been listening to Haddonfield Radio Season 2, you know from various episodes, Robert Shea was clearly a frustrated actor.
Thank God they cut his scenes because he was really bad in this. But anyway.
He really has one speed as a quote-unquote actor.
Yeah.
And as an actor, he makes an excellent producer.
Yeah.
That's what we'll say. But you gotta love that he's so in love with the movie making process. He so enjoys being on the set and watching while the kind of the donuts are being made, so to speak. That he likes to get in front of the camera. He likes to be behind it. Wes Craven has said numerous times that really Robert Shea's a frustrated director. He's also probably a frustrated writer. I think he's just a guy who just loved the movie business so much he wanted to be a part of all of it.
This is a pretty, even though it's obviously CG, the effect on her nose, it's pretty gruesome.
I mean, it's a
cool
scary
idea.
notion.
Yeah, it's just the blood, all this the fake blood in the CG stuff. Unfortunately, for where they're at in 2003,
And look, all the
it just
CG in the
sticks
world
out.
is one thing. What really is the problem, and I'm going to put it out there, it's Kelly Rowland's performance in reacting to it. Look, you could have subpar effects or subpar CG or subpar anything. If the actor sells it, well, then you're counteracting some of the negativity. Well, she's just adding to it because she's got no charisma.
On the Blu-ray, there's some great behind-the-scenes footage of them doing fighting Jason, and you just see Ronny Yu keep coming up to her and sort of being like, Stop acting badly, basically. He's like, do it she's just hitting him.
Oh, you're talking about Kelly Rowland?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see. But, back to his directing style, he would have these other second unit directors that came with him from Hong Kong, and he trusted them so much, and like I said, he would block out with them in the hotel rooms like the nights before the whole scene, so everybody knew exactly what he wanted, and they were just banging stuff out, in multiple locations every day, and they filmed it really, really quickly.
Look, you got to realize that it's very important contextually. Asian cinema is produced very differently than American cinema. It's produced on with far less capital, for the budgets, and the films are produced so quickly.
They're more planned out. There's less improvising as you go.
So planned out, and they're always done in a very fast schedule, and it's just a different atmosphere on a set. And I'm not trying not to generalize here, of course,
right.
But just generally, you if you study film and you study international film, you can just see it in the behind-the-scenes supplemental features on many Asian films. You can just see Japanese films that it's a different culture. It's a different filmmaking culture. And I also think it's cool, Ronny Yu, when you look at him under the spectrum of the Child's Play franchise. He really, diametrically changed that franchise into what it has become today.
Yeah.
I would actually argue that Ronny Yu sort of saved the Child's Play franchise and took it from being the Child's Play franchise. After Bride of Chucky, it became the Chucky franchise.
Right.
And there is a distinction there. And now you see Chucky with a successful television series that's gone on we're recording this in 2024 for our listeners in the future. It's like 3 or 4 seasons already, and should be looked at as a template for any of these other franchises going forward, trying to move into the streaming or television, zone.
The van that they're in, I love it. The old, conversion van. It's very reminiscent to what you would see in a lot of Friday the 13th movies. The kids are always driving around. The kids, the teenagers, whatever. You know what I mean? It's that old school vibe in the van. I love it. The black lights and
guys,
everything.
You have to remember that as of 2024, Joe became a grandfather.
Stop.
So anytime he sees anyone under the age of 50 now, they're called quote unquote kids.
Everybody's a kid.
Kids.
This whole rave scene, it's.
I like the way that they depict what a rave feels like sensually.
I
that
know.
everybody, or it's like when you see a movie that there is a sequence with somebody under the effect of drugs, where clearly the actors and filmmakers never took those drugs because they don't know how to depict the effects.
Yeah, the whole feel here, it's definitely a product of the times, you know what I mean? The strobe footage when they're dancing, and of course the club music. I mean, remember, we even made a film around 2005, and we had a little scene that very much the same feel with the club music and everything. I don't know, it was a, I guess, thing people were doing at the time. But this whole scene also was much longer and had a little more of these... little more dialogue amongst the subplots of all these characters and stuff. So, you know, I'm glad they trimmed it down. This is not my favorite scene of the movie at all. It's a little hard to stomach personally, but
find it so interesting when you watch the movie and we're doing the commentary. Like, I've watched this movie over the month to prepare. But when you watch a movie and you're recording a commentary, we, of course, have the volume of the movie turned down to a minimum because we're simply basically watching what we already know and discussing it. Okay, boom. But when you watch a film with limited or no audio, you see the film in a different way. And you can really see a film that has some fat on it or some excess sort of drag. And a lot of the films we've done fan commentaries for, when we're recording them, I can really notice that drag.
Yeah.
But maybe I wouldn't have noticed it when I was watching it as a full experience with the audio. And through some of these scenes, it feels like it could have been edited down a little bit. Wouldn't you suggest?
Yeah.
Like, this is the point to me in the movie where the movie really starts to kick into another gear and starts to kind of take off for the rest of the film. But the energy of what I would call like the first half of the film does feel a little pacey to me as we're recording this.
Yeah, no, it definitely, when they try to linger too long on the other elements that aren't Freddy and Jason are directly relating to them, I could care less that these two used to be.
Yeah,
boyfriend
of
and girl.
course.
No, I get it. There's a bit of
It
a
feels
tie
like filler.
where he went away because he saw the dad kill the mom, but it was actually Freddy and blah 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 blah. But they just, I don't know. Also, this idea that a bunch of teens have a friend that's killed, and they're like, well, we should go to a party and blow off steam.
Here's the thing.
Not that I'm looking for real realism in these movies, but it doesn't feel right.
In order for an audience, in my opinion, to really digest an emotional beat within a story, you have to already be locked into the characters and locked into the performances and tied that way into the story so that the emotional beats have a currency and a weight to an audience. But the problem is, when you're watching one of these movies, you've already been trained to know that every single living person you see entering or exiting the frame is going to end up dead.
Yeah, I know, of course.
So you instinctually know not to create any bonds.
Yeah, right here. As soon as she is by herself in the cornfield, you know she's screwed.
I have to wonder why Catherine Isabel, who's so frickin' beautiful, would either choose or be told to wear that stupid hat for her whole performance.
Well, it was supposed to, I don't know, it was supposed to be like I said, PJ Soul's character.
Yeah, I know.
And
but
Carrie, that's their...
No, it does make sense for that, but she also looks like somebody who doesn't really smoke and is smoking as a character, but she doesn't actually smoke as a person.
According to Ronny Yu, they used 300 gallons of blood making this movie.
I believe that. We haven't seen too much of it yet, though.
No,
and what we did see was digital.
We're about to, when he starts attacking. And this is one of the scenes that is on the Blu-ray where you can see the whole making of when Jason comes out of on fire, hacks a few people and then gets sprayed with the beer. It's really, it's interesting if you like seeing that stuff, to watch how the whole thing goes down, especially with him being completely on fire. They also, I think... They won an award or set a record for it at the end when we see Freddy and Jason on fire flying into the lake.
Yeah.
That was like the setting a record for a double burn, a long double, like two people burning at the same time, a stunt.
Am I mistaken?
That was a big deal.
Or does her T-shirt say Hong Kong?
I did not notice.
I'm going to have to take a closer look. I think it might say Hong Kong, but it has a strange image that doesn't... I'm probably wrong. I like that. It's, of course, a callback to Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984.
And thank God they did it practically. You know what I mean?
We all know, if you've seen the 2010 remake, they do that. They emulate that famous iconic shot, and they do it digitally, and it absolutely sucks balls. It has no power at all. You have to do that creatively and physically and practically in order to sell that. I mean, period.
So this whole, when we're in Freddy's boiler room, this was an actual place, this boiler room, that they added all the extra pipes and wires and cabling. If you look around, it's very messy. And what they were doing is, again, in Hong Kong, there's a bunch of cities where they didn't have building codes. And so all these buildings are built up really high and dangerously, but all of the electrical and plumbing, and it's just all hanging down the sides of the buildings because people can do whatever they want. There's no codes, nobody enforcing anything. So they're replicating that feel here in the boiler room. That I wish I could remember the name of the city, but it's like it's a certain style, that messy city look.
I think this is one of the best Freddy scenes in this movie.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of Robert Englund, of course, and also the lighting, and that the lighting's doing something that the earlier Nightmare films did so beautifully. They aren't trying to show off the makeup. It's using the lighting to basically conceal the makeup into small detail that just is sort of, is impressionistic,
yeah.
And I like it. I like it a lot more. I think it's really effective.
It's also like I'd say, marker or clue of the when you're in a dream world. The lighting gets exaggerated and, very red and whatnot there.
I had in my notes, and we were talking about Kane Hodder a little bit ago, and I knew it was in my notes somewhere, so I wanted to bring it up just as a point. Apparently in August of 2002, Entertainment Weekly did run a story saying that Kane Hodder had been contractually hired to play Jason in Freddy vs. Jason. However, later that year, IGN, which is a web outlet, they said that they ditched Hodder. So, again, there was some evidence that Kane Hodder was a part of the pre-production of this film.
Oh, he definitely was. And I think I'm not saying Ronny Yu made some decision to say, like, we're not going to use Kane Hodder, but basically, once, and I love the demon teeth there, see, he's really mad.
I love it. I love it.
Jason took her. But once Ronny Yu came on board is basically when they stopped.
Yeah.
There wasn't any talk of Kane Hodder anymore. And Ronny Yu says over and over again, it has nothing personal, had nothing to do with anything besides they just wanted to start over with their own Jason and a bigger Jason.
That edit right there with that bong and Jason standing there. Well, this is one of the moments where I do like Ken Kersinger's physicality, was in that particular shot and this particular sequence. Because here he does look like a frickin' tower.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he's tall, all right.
If he only had maybe broader shoulders and a less long neck, maybe it would be an amazing looking Jason. I don't know, but there is just something that, oh my God. See, some of the kills, that the way Ronny Yu creates the atmosphere for, they do feel very cartoonish. Like when Jason threw the guy across the cornfield, and the way he snapped that guy's neck, it almost like it's meant to engender laughter as opposed to screams.
Yeah, well, Ronny talks about a lot in his movies that when doing horror, that you set up the comedy too, because then it makes the scary that much more scarier. Well, you're sort of,
I think the emotional reactions are so related. That's why, like I've said before, comedies and horror movies, in terms of their genres, are usually created very similarly. The way you position where laughs are in a comedy, or where you position where scares are in a horror movie, is very similar. And it's like the emotions work like peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, that was pretty cool, that part of it. It teeters between, funny deaths and some good stuff.
But I think even in some of the greatest Friday the 13th films, you are laughing at the kills. It's a glee. It's like, it's not laughter like humor, it's exuberance.
Yeah, exactly. Like
you're getting what you wanted. You're getting what you came to the theater to see. And so you're reacting positively, not negatively. You're not repulsed by the killings.
Yeah, Friday the 13th movies and even Nightmare movies, the kills are awesome, but they're not they're not done in a way that's ever truly scaring me or.
Right.
You know, it's a different. I don't ever have a visceral reaction like getting goosebumps or something during a suspenseful, creepy ghost movie.
It's like
or something.
we've talked about in other episodes where the action films of the 80s and 90s and the horror films of the 80s and 90s were almost indistinguishable from each other, fundamentally in terms of how they were made,
right.
in terms of the way the narratives played out. Rambo is basically a slasher. The Terminator is basically a slasher. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's just the narrative context is completely different and the genre is completely different. But the nuts and bolts of the way the films are assembled were exactly the same. And you would get that same type of excitement watching Rambo mow down enemy soldiers as you would watching Jason mow down teenagers.
Well, funny you should bring that up. So Ronny Yu also talks about when we get towards the end when Freddy and Jason are actually really going at it, that his inspiration for that sort of scene was Rocky. Was the last fight that Apollo, is beating down Rocky, and there's no good reason why he should be able to win that fight and get up, but he does. And that Rocky is Jason in this movie to him, And that's what he said. It was in his head for that big fight and how those two characters were gonna interact.
I had kind of touched on this earlier in the episode. And I think about it a lot when you look at these versus movies as almost its own little subgenre by 2024. And the idea that I think when they work best, like I said, is when you take the two opposing characters and you have them fight a couple times, and then they have to team up against a worse adversary for the climax.
So this
doesn't have that third act.
Right.
It doesn't have that point where Freddy and Jason, where there's some surprise element in the third act that's such an antagonist that they have to team up to defeat it together. And I think that would have taken this movie to that next level. Wouldn't you like to see Freddy and Jason team up?
So, one of the original ideas for the beginning and ending this movie. Originally, the movie was going to begin and end in hell. Not the fire, brimstone, typical hell, but a very dark, depressing, cold type of hell. And but by the end, what was going to happen when they get to Camp Crystal Lake, a natural phenomenon happens and it like drains the lake. So it's like a dead lake, and they're fighting there. And then all of a sudden, a big, giant water hand reaches up and pulls them both back down to hell, where they, you kind of pan out and you realize that they're surrounded by demons, and they're now perpetually stuck in a match forever in hell in front of all these demons,
Well, I actually kind of love that.
I know, it's a neat idea.
It feels more like a comic book.
Well, because there was going to be a little more in between there, because it was still going to be the old Freddy gets his arm ripped off,
right,
and then I guess like this girl's dad right here was going to show up at the lake and grab the glove, and then he was going to get sucked down to hell. And then Freddy kind of gets his glove back, and he's all happy, and he's like, ha ha ha. And then you see the glint of a machete, and you realize Jason's there. But then it pulls back, and you start seeing all these demons surrounding them.
Yeah, see, that's kind of
cool. And
then
Freddy's no longer like happy. He realizes, oh, shit.
Yep.
And they just have to fight forever for these demons.
I think one of these versus movies, to me, and that's come out since this, that works really well, is Godzilla versus Kong. And it works exactly like I described. Godzilla and Kong, they're fighting a few times. Then Mechagodzilla appears, and they got to fight him together. Because as a fan, I think it is extraordinarily entertaining to posit in your own mind what would happen if Freddy and Jason fought. But I also want to know what would happen if they joined forces. Well, what would that be?
I think they were getting there. I mean, if you were going to start either getting to the Ash or Pinhead or even Michael Myers, because they did talk to them at one point, you probably would have gotten, at that point, Freddy and Jason teaming up. Because
what an exciting
to get this new,
kind
thing.
of a twist that would be.
There's a few scenes in this movie, and that was just one of them, when she's come down the hedges. It's very Halloween feel to me, the neighborhood.
Yeah, they look like Pasadena.
Her name is Lori, which
maybe
I don't
it's
know.
an homage,
in my
gentle
head,
homage.
I just thought it was an odd choice for major franchises to name their character.
Or
after,
let me
with
just
the same
spitball
name.
this.
I don't know.
Let me spitball this. At the very end, here's what happens. At the very end of this movie, in the final scene, the villains are defeated, and somehow you see what Laurie's real last name is at the end, and it
Right,
turns
sure.
out to be Strode.
Sure.
And that sets up the sequel.
Yeah.
All right, you
There
could have
you
done
go.
that.
That'd be cool.
You could have done that.
Another
It
fun-
would have been stupid, but you could have done that.
Fun fact here: the redheaded dude who plays this kid's dead brother. If you remember the movie Christmas Story.
Oh, yeah, of course.
That
Yep.
was Farkas, right?
Who
The,
stuck his...
He was the
he was the bully.
He was the bully.
Yeah, with the
yep,
coonskin cap.
yep, who was always beating him up and stuff. So that's the same kid there. And this whole scene was also it was supposed to play out differently, and where before he walks in, he sees on his TV, like Freddy's showing him footage of his brother killing himself in this bathroom. And then that's why he goes in to be like, am I really seeing this? And then this whole thing happens. And then, in a minute, you're going to see, as this kid is dreaming about the blood and everything, you'll see the eels on the floor.
Oh, wow.
But that was supposed to be, there's a deleted scene where you see it, where the eels are supposed to come out of his mouth. Freddy says something like, mouth, don't talk with your mouth full. And all these eels start spurting out of his mouth. And it's CG. And because once they got on set, the animal person told them that it was against the law for them to let eels hit the floor. So they couldn't drop them. So they added CG ones coming out of the kid's mouth, and it just never looked right. And so they cut it.
Boy, do they look like brothers, these two actors, don't
Right,
they?
yeah.
They really are cast perfectly as brothers,
Yeah.
for whatever that's worth. This, to me, really feels a little bit like Nightmare 3.
Yeah.
This
Oh, yeah.
feels so much like Dream Warriors, all of this.
Exactly. And see how there's suddenly eels with no explanation?
Yeah.
'Cause they cut
you're
out
right.
when they come out of his mouth.
You're right.
You know. I love all the homages, to the previous Nightmare movies. Even there's a lot of Friday the 13th. Little homages here and there.
I think if you take a moment and you imagine this film playing in front of an opening night, Friday night, opening day audience, this movie people must have been hooting and hollering. Like, I can't quite remember. I know I was there, but I don't really remember.
So I guess, the kill in the beginning when the boyfriend gets crushed in the bed. Originally, the studio really wanted them to cut that scene, and the writers pushed and pushed and pushed, and they let him leave it in for the test screenings to see. And of course, that got like the biggest reaction, applause, and from them, and so they got to leave it in. It's also interesting to note that when they did the test screenings, they did not let audiences see the very end, and this message came up on the screen, and it says, and this was supposed to be an homage to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. On the screen, it came up, says, on August 15th, 2003, you see the final 60 seconds and see who has survived, ... and what is left of them. And there was a tagline for Texas Chainsaw, which was, who will survive and what will be left of them.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I like that.
So they but then there was, Ronny Yu did an interview before the movie came out that sort of implied that there would be 3 different endings, and people wouldn't know which one they would get when they go to the theater. Obviously, Freddy or Jason, or it's a draw. But it was
it's
just
so
taken
expensive to actually exhibit and distribute a film that way.
Yeah.
And so many films have tried to toy with utilizing that, but you notice that you've never really seen it end up in a movie theater. Because you have to print the movie, say there's 3 endings, you have to print those reels 3 different ways. That's very expensive.
Maybe nowadays with the digital,
Maybe it would be different.
But I don't know if it
Clearly,
was...
this was during the George W. Bush era. You see him up on the wall in the police station. I think that's kind of interesting.
This police chief, according to Robert Englund, was his drinking buddy while they were filming. Every night, or they would go down to the hotel bar, he said, and close it out.
That actor, he's like, if you need a guy to play like a small town police chief, well, he's the guy.
Yeah.
I don't even know if we've got his... Gary Chalk is his name. He's the guy.
Yeah.
He looks right in a police uniform or a sheriff's uniform, especially in like a smaller town context.
Yeah.
He really fits. I'm just realizing that that actress is Monica Keena. It didn't occur to me in my mind. Wow. All right. Well, there you go.
James Wan was originally going to direct this too, but he had committed to Saw.
Wow.
Yeah, he was
James Wan. Wow.
Yeah, he really wanted to do it. They wanted him, but
he would have been great.
Yeah, they just couldn't
James
make it
Wan.
work with the Saw schedule that was coming up.
You notice in movies, pothead characters in movies are literally always smoking weed like 24 hours a day. Can you imagine if you literally were smoking weed literally nonstop? I suppose there's some people out there who probably do live like that.
Like you were saying before, where when sometimes in movies they depict people on some drugs and it's not very realistic.
Yeah.
Like later on when that kid gets stoned and suddenly sees like the Freddy caterpillar. Now, I know it's supposed to be a dream, sort of, but like,
they're going with the Alice in Wonderland.
I'm like, is that what they really think? People get stoned, just start seeing
like
stuff
the
out of nowhere?
1967 like cliche trip imagery handbook. Honestly.
Now, it's funny on a personal note. I think I've mentioned in earlier episodes at some point that I used to work out in California right out of college, and I got to work on Space Jam for a special effects house, CineSite. CineSite, I found out as I was watching the Blu-ray extras here, and there's a whole section about the visual effects, and this guy pops up on the screen, and I'm like, oh my God, I worked with that guy on Space Jam.
That was in the behind the scenes features on this.
Yeah,
my God.
Kevin Elam, and he talks about how they couldn't pull off the Freddy caterpillar for the budget that they had, but CineSite, since he still had a lot of friends over there, he gave them the work. They basically said they'd do it for whatever the cost was going to be. Now, what did
CineSite do? They did like computer generated effects?
They were Warner Brothers sort of computer effects company.
Okay, gotcha.
And so that, CineSite came in to do that one effect, the caterpillar. But
how did you get that job?
I just cold turkey sent a resume in, and the guy who interviewed me also went to Emerson College.
But how did you even know to CineSite?
I was living out there.
Wow.
It was like weeks.
Because guys, I'm asking because this is pre-internet. You couldn't just Google who to send resumes to.
I had to. I don't even know what I did to look up all these names and things, but it was like you could easily access all the productions going on. And I was just sending resumes.
It used to be
everywhere.
in like these trade magazines.
Yeah.
That you
I went to
up.
Disney at one point. They wanted to give me a job just reading scripts for the.
That's like my dream job.
Well, it's just the direct-to-video ones. It was going to be like the Bambi 2 and Aladdin 2 and all that type of stuff.
Here's the thing I'm going to say. Sometimes in these close-ups, especially in the last few scenes of Freddy, I do think the makeup looks, again, a little dry. And remember, there was another Nightmare film we watched, and it might have been New Nightmare, where I think sometimes
Freddy's Dead. To me, it was Freddy's Dead.
Where it looks a little dry. And when it's dry, it looks so much like just prosthetic.
And Robert Englund talks about how on this movie, when they get to the big fight sequences, there's a lot of fire, and it's controlled fire, but there's a lot of fire around them, and it would always be on one side of his face, and when they would go to take the appliances off, the foam latex off his face at the night, there'd be always one side that was harder to pull off because it would essentially start to like melt a little bit.
Oh my God!
From all the heat, from
That's
all the
crazy.
fire around them.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not saying it's the best Freddy makeup or anything. It just never bugs me in the movie. It just doesn't stick out to me. I don't get caught up. If anything, his teeth stick out a little bit. Like I feel like you see his teeth way more clearly in the movie than usual. But I just don't mind it.
I mentioned one of the details of the Freddy makeup in this I really like, but there's like these striations of burn that go up the bridge of the nose and become almost like eyebrows.
Yeah.
And what they do that is really good with this makeup is they give Robert Englund some extra sort of emoting ability because the scars do kind of work when he wrinkles his forehead like eyebrows.
So to geek out a little bit, what they did differently with this Freddy latex appliances, it was still foam latex, which was the standard thing to be using all through the series on his face. But what he talked about was different on this one is they had actually layered in like nylon into the latex as they were making the pieces so that it could actually stretch a bit as they pulled it over his head or had to move with his face, and it was much more reactive because of that nylon being incorporated into the mask. And it was pretty much a one-piece thing that would pull over with a few small pieces on the front, which was very different, than the early ones, which would take hours and hours and hours.
And it's ironic because by 94 in New Nightmare, they had basically created it was like a pullover and made it so much easier for Robert Englund,
So this was like a half and half. It's like a pullover without the face, and then they still put appliances on for right around his nose and cheeks and all that. But
interestingly, I was just curious. I wonder who did the special effects makeup for Freddy vs. Jason. Well, the interesting thing. The special effects makeup department was 26 people for this movie. And yet I don't recognize any of their names. No, in fact,
I wanted to kind of also have that name ready, but I couldn't find any one person that was sort of attributed to just the Freddy stuff. Now, on that Blu-ray DVD, they do interview makeup people and they talk about it, but I'm not sure if they point out any one of them as being
But you know what's so freaking weird about that? All through both the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise's history and the Friday the 13th franchise's history, you have had perhaps the deepest bench of legendary special effects makeup artists. Yeah. Here they have the team up of the century and none of them wanted to work on this. That is so freaking creepy looking.
It is.
That caterpillar, I have to say, actually to me, I think that's freaking the creepiest effect in the whole movie.
It is. It's very, this whole thing
is so weird. And that it sort of looks
weird.
like Freddy, It's,
oh, yeah, they talk about it was designed after him and everything.
Joe, I think that looks awesome.
It looks good. I mean, it's just...
And see how they use the smoke to sort of conceal the sort of the fritziness of the effects?
Yeah. No, for 2003, it was good,
I bet it got a big laugh.
Unfortunately, that company, CineSite, that did it, that I used to work for, they didn't survive.
There's no CineSite anymore?
No, by the time those guys were doing the interviews for the Blu-ray, they talked about how CineSite had already gone under. I don't think it went under, but a lot of times those companies always get bought by other companies or bigger companies or this and that. So it might have been something like that because they did major work. I mean, I can't imagine them just shutting down because they didn't have business. And this was a plot point I had to go back after it kind of kept coming on. I'm like, wait a minute, what are all these people, these kids in here? And so they were ones that were given too much Hypnosil when the parents were trying to experiment with giving Hypnosil to kids.
Which tracks in the nightmare mythology.
And they're stuck in comas now because of it.
They said, you know what, this caterpillar is cool. Let's bring the caterpillar back for one more quick scene.
Well, it's interesting. So I'm trying to think, have we seen Freddy, besides in part 2, have we seen Freddy inhabit a person like that? Where he just kind of goes into the person... And
he's duplicated people numerous times, like where you think you're talking to the person or you're making out with someone and it's actually Freddy.
But that's in the dream world, and now we're in the real world.
I think if you think it's a good point you just brought up. I actually think in part 2 is really the only time I can think of that Freddy was so, engaged by this one thing of possessing someone.
Yeah, exactly.
Where in part 2 is really sort of a possession movie.
Yeah.
That character is possessed by Freddy.
Yeah.
And remember in the pool party sequence in Nightmare 2, we were having that debate whether are the people at the party seeing the teenage kid killing everyone or are they seeing Freddy?
Right.
Remember?
Right.
Because of the possession angle.
Right.
Immobitane. That's kind of cool. Like immobilize,
yes,
immobitane. I like that.
They're always so clever with their.
It reminds me of one of my favorite fake names of a movie in James Cameron's Avatar. The element they're trying to harvest on the Pandora moon is called unobtainium.
It's so.
And then I look it up, and that's a real thing.
No.
In the real world, elements that are waiting to be get a disposition of what they are called unobtainium. Now, I don't know if that's from Avatar or if James Cameron borrowed it from that, but that kid did a good job of lip syncing, or maybe it was Robert Englund that matched his in ADR, but that looked good. It worked.
I love. Well, he talks about how he coached a kid in how to hold his head. How to stand
good because it worked
and everything.
It looked good.
Yeah. I mean, and then he did. He overdubbed it. I know. I kind of love this idea that Freddy knows he has to just sort of step in and take care of Jason himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
he's not even worrying about these other kids that are there right there. He's just.
you could say, well, how would Jason let this kid stab him with? Well, Jason's not the brightest bulb in the room. Nobody's nobody's saying Jason's this thoughtful, provocative predator who hunts and kills. No, Jason's just a killing machine.
There's actually a great cut scene in the deleted scenes when Jason and Freddy are fighting, where Freddy's just nailing him with these insults of like about how dumb he is and how slow he is and how he's like a big dumb dog, and then he actually like knees him in the balls, and Jason doesn't do anything, and Freddy's like, oh, no balls, eh?
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was
I got a funny little Friday the 13th fun fact for you,
Yeah.
as we're getting towards the climax here. When, of course, Sean S. Cunningham, before he even had a screenplay or a movie, Friday the 13th, he created that ad I mentioned for Variety.
Right.
And printed it, the scariest movie ever made, Friday the 13th, to drum up interest. When Victor Miller was writing the script, he wanted to use a completely different title, not Friday the 13th. Do you want to know what the title he wanted was?
what?
A Long Night at Camp Blood.
Oh, I think I've heard that. Yeah.
Now, I actually kind of like that title.
Yeah.
But it is silly. It doesn't have the catchiness of Friday the 13th.
So now this movie did some cool PR stuff. You remember before it came out, they had the fighter style weigh-in Vegas with Robert
Yeah, that's
Englund.
a real thing.
Yeah,
I love
know.
that.
They came out to promote it.
Like UFC style,
Yeah.
they had, if you don't know, they had an event where Robert Englund in full Freddy makeup and Ken Kurtzinger in full Jason makeup did what you see UFC fighters do, and they met and had a press conference before
Yeah.
the fight.
Yeah.
Brilliant marketing, in my opinion.
They also did these series of screenings, the Alamo Draft House, the week it came out, where it would be, they set up like Camp Crystal Lakes, like they called it Camp Hack and Slash,
Yep,
yes.
Yep.
And it was for like adults. But basically, all day long, they make it like you're in a 70s camp for the summer, and you do all these little activities.
How fun.
And then at night, they had the screen set up, and everyone watched this movie, the premiere.
Love that.
You know, and it looked cool.
I remember reading the Ain't It Cool News Harry Knowles review of Freddy vs. Jason, and I remember it was such a glowing review. And I used to be...
Harry Knowles was there. So on the Blu-ray, they have footage of that Camp Hackensack thing. It's like old,
Oh, wow.
from a camcorder.
Well, that must be the review from that screening.
And I keep seeing Harry Knowles right
Yep,
there in the
yep.
audience, you know?
Harry Knowles, if you don't know, in the early days of internet kind of movie blogging,
Yeah.
Ain't It Cool News was like...
He was the Godfather.
It was basically, Harry Knowles basically created all of the internet culture of movie analysis and movie reviewing, and that's done by quote-unquote non-professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And he would write these ostentatious, gregarious, wild reviews. He did a famous one for Guillermo del Toro's Blade 2 that's very legendary. And the Freddy vs. Jason review he wrote really made me excited to see the movie.
This Freddy, I love it. It's like a great mix of some early scary Freddy at times, when he's mad and pissed off and like the demon. And then they have just the right amount of camp. Now notice right there the tone change.
I like that.
Right? The lighting. Now, because now we're Jason. It's the water thing. It's the...
Well, how interesting, and not to get too esoteric, but you have these elemental beings.
Yeah, fire and water, of course.
Jason is element is water, or at least his opposing element.
Each of their fears
his
are
oppositional
natural
element is water. Freddy's oppositional element is fire.
Yeah.
And it's interesting in the pairing of these two characters. See, you wouldn't have got that with Michael Myers and Jason, or Pinhead and Freddy, or any combination therein.
Yeah.
That elemental angle does have some weight and does make sense for these characters, and I think it's just cool.
And for a filmmaker, it's just a beautiful thing to play with. A very natural.
Yeah, it's natural.
Two the biggest elements.
I see the Crimson Skull, the Misfits logo hanging there.
And obviously 70s van and all that.
Yep.
But set dressing was also like the skull, like death's always watching them. It's always looming. It's always right there.
Just off the top of my head, what do you think about Jason Takes Manhattan? Is that one of the ones you like or don't like?
Well, I do. But it's more of a nostalgic, I think, reason that was the first one I got to see from beginning to end,
which was like right in our teenage years.
Right, it was when it was came to cable,
and
and they replayed it, and it was obviously
This makeup is
a little
really
more
good.
campy. Yeah,
This childhood makeup is really
even
good.
that head is really good.
Really
you know?
good.
And this reminds me of Jason Takes Manhattan, when we also see him revert back to this kid version of
That,
himself.
like I said, that is my favorite scene in Jason Takes Manhattan.
Yeah.
The movie should have been called Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes a Long Boat Ride Towards Manhattan. That was what the title should have been.
It was fun. I remember all the advertising 'cause I was a kid, and they did all the
it
New
was
York,
so
New
much
York,
fun.
commercials, and it's just I'm very aware of it from it actually coming out in my childhood, and so yes, I look back on it fondly. I don't know, just judging it as a movie compared to the rest. I don't know.
I also
don't
like
know.
this juxtaposition in this scene of Freddy and the childhood version of Jason when you consider the context of Freddy and children.
Right.
That there's this other angle that sort of now exists where Freddy's got this creepy pedo angle with Jason.
Yeah. This whole scene too is
Reminds me of
this
Jaws.
dream version of Jason's world. It's his dream. This is what he pictures and goes back to.
Right.
And the idea that this house is just, has a doorway into water full of bodies. It's so creepy. But the thing I always go to is that in his dream world, when you go in his house, there's like a little ukulele on his bed. I'm like, does Jason sit around in his dream world and just play the ukulele?
It's a very eccentric detail. I mean, you have to consider, like anything in a painting, nothing's by accident.
Definitely there.
Some production, PA, went in there and put that there. It's the director saw it there, so it becomes part of the fabric of meaning of the frame.
I believe though that was a second unit thing. His main guy. I can't think of the second unit director's name, was the one you see kind of doing that whole scene. I believe his first name was Poon.
Poon? His first name was Poon.
It really was.
Let's find out, because I want to know.
And here's another little homage to the original Friday the 13th. If you look, they put the burlap sack on his head right here. See?
That's so cool.
Right, yeah. And they shot this again with like weird frame rates and everything to get that strobe effect. It wasn't added later. They actually are doing this in camera as they're filming to get all these effects. Because again, Ronny Yu is the type of director that plans everything.
Was it Hang Sang Poon?
Yeah, but I believe...
Well, in a lot of Asian names, what we would see as our last name is actually their first name.
Because in the making of, I believe everybody was actually calling him Poon.
Like the director Chan Wook Park, the Korean director, people call him Park.
Yeah.
That's his actual first name.
Yeah. I think it's so clever, sort of in the dream world here, when the water starts coming out of Jason's from the mask because he's drowning in the van.
Well, there's also a distinction here in Freddy vs. Jason, a slight tweak to the lore, in that it wasn't just that there was two counselors fornicating, so they neglected to notice that Jason drowned. In this interpretation, the other campers are actually murdering Jason by pushing him into the water.
Which just is his dream world, though, right?
That's
exactly.
But what I'm saying is, what you're seeing is, you could be seeing Jason's memory of the actual events.
That's what actually happened. Yeah.
That yes,
I see
the camp counselors. Pamela Voorhees had every right to be upset with the camp counselors who weren't paying attention.
Right.
But what Pamela Voorhees didn't know is that the other kids actually murdered her son.
Yeah. Yeah.
That if it wasn't for those kids, Jason wouldn't have drowned.
But the counselors should have been paying attention too. Is ultimately the thing.
But
right?
all I'm trying to say is,
there's more
I kind of like that.
Yeah, they open it up a little bit.
Extra little detail there that sort of changes the perception of the events.
This is some great makeup too. This was like the only time that Ken had to actually wear the full makeup. Yeah, it's so great, so great. The idea of having to give this thing mouth to mouth, and it. Kind of matches that version of Jason that we see without the mask in the previous movies when he rips it off, to scare the kids.
It's a great scene.
Yeah.
This is a very effective scene. And you know what is good about it? it's funny, it's creative, it's squirmy, it's gross, and it's sort of original.
Yeah.
Having to give Jason mouth to mouth.
Right, of
That's
course.
so funny because who would ever think to have to do that?
Yeah, and there he
There's
goes
more
flying.
Ronny Yu crazy, people flying through the air, whoosha style.
This is one of my favorite
that.
shots
Love
right
that.
here when he
Look
comes
at
out.
this.
Look at that.
I mean, it's probably the most iconic
and that's
Freddy shot
Demon
in
Freddy.
this movie.
That's Demon Freddy, even though you can't quite tell there. See?
I
But
love it.
It is. And this was all shot during the day, and then they just manipulated the sky afterwards.
And I have to say, what's kind of cool is, in a way, this interpretation of Freddy does actually seem to address the new Nightmare Freddy that wasn't really Freddy, that was a demon. And so it kind of brings in some of that demonic Freddy energy from that movie into the characterization of Freddy in this movie.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that wasn't intentional, but I feel like I see it.
Yeah.
Think about the when you see in New Nightmare, when you see the quote-unquote Freddy demon turn into his real form and he has those pointy ears.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. It might be a connection.
I mean, their little plan here, it's clever. It's a combination of, some of the stuff from the other Nightmare movies with being able to... I love in all the Nightmare movies how at some point the characters have to come to the realization that they can pull things out of the dream world.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, right.
And that's always
Yep.
how ultimately, it's
It's really how you defeat Freddy.
Yeah, and of course this is the big reveal that Freddy actually was doing the killing.
Do you notice in this movie, Freddy's sweater colors are very odd?
Are they?
And I don't know if it has to do with the lighting on set,
Yeah.
but I notice all through the film, and especially in what we just saw there, Freddy's sweater almost looks like it's like red and purple.
Maybe it's throwing
And there's
so much
other
blue
moments,
light that we don't
and
get in the
that's
other
what
movies.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
is that Ronny Yu uses these elaborate Hong Kong-inspired lighting setups, especially in the fight sequences between Freddy and Jason, and perhaps those lights were sort of... Look at the sweater. Well, you're colorblind.
I know,
so
that's
wouldn't
why
work.
it doesn't always...
Joe's actually literally colorblind, so I don't know what I'm trying to get him to look at, but... You guys tell me in the comment section, am I crazy, or does the sweater colors look different in this movie?
There was also him carving on her chest. There was a reference
In the deleted scenes?
No, right there when he was over her. It's some sort of a reference. I can't remember. Oh, the Last House on the Left. It was a homage to.
Oh,
There's
okay.
a similar scene.
Yeah, nighty night.
Yeah, that was the scene you see them filming where Ronny Yu keeps telling her hit him like every hit counts.
Freddy's eyes here look digital to me.
Huh.
They look like they were matted on CG. Maybe there was an issue in the
look at
filming
that,
or something wrong with the makeup.
Yeah,
Do you see
just
what I'm
couldn't see
talking
enough,
about?
yeah.
That there's like a blankness
Yeah.
to his eyeballs. And I'll tell you something about Robert Englund. You know that it stands out to me because Robert Englund's eyes are so expressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was some sort of CG
Well,
mat.
that same effects sort of featurette that's on the Blu-ray I watched, the effects guys talk constantly how, they tried to do everything on set, but ultimately if it didn't work, they would just use CG to fix, everything, really.
That injury being thrown into like a door jam sticking out and being... Think about bumping into something like that. Never mind getting it jabbed through you.
Look at her hands just going through the fire.
I like that. See, there's some of this Ronny Yu camera work and direction is just so good. It's just so kinetic and explosive and so alive.
This is where he starts doing a lot of the frame rate differences in the film to create different feels and movements. And I guess there was also, right here, there was a line cut that the test audiences felt was too cheesy, where it cuts to the girl and she's like something like get your tickets folks to it's Freddy versus Jason,
I kind of like it. I'm such a goon. I kind of like it.
It was something like that. It was cheesy, but it was...
Because if you were in the theater on opening night in 2003, it would have made you cheer, as cheesy as it is.
Yeah. Well, I guess it
but
didn't.
it wouldn't work.
Didn't. Apparently,
in
to the
legacy.
test audiences, they all complained about it.
Yeah,
so
I see that. I can
and when
see
you
that.
see it, if you see it ever,
I
it is
see that.
cheesy. It's pretty cheesy the way she delivers it and everything. But
Oof.
and this poor
Now,
bastard.
Kelly Rowland, has she had the infamous cringy line yet? Has she said it yet?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, it's.
I think
it's
you
coming
guys
up
all know
after
what I'm
this.
talking
Yeah.
about. There's a line she delivers that and we'll talk about it in a minute, but even the writers of the movie have said was not in their script. So I'm very curious where it came from, if that's the case, because it stands out like a sore thumb in a 2024, from a 2024 perspective.
Yeah.
But I think even in 2003, it would have been a little off color.
Oh, definitely sticks out. There was actually more to this scene, too, that they cut, where she basically kisses him and says, actually, I do like you, don't tell anybody, all this, like she's trying to play coy. And then, again, test audiences felt it was just too cheesy. And I think it kind of has to do with her acting is cheesy, you know? And how sad it is he's just bleeding
He
out.
really looked dead to me. Like,
Yeah.
that was well done.
Yeah.
I thought that was actually executed very well. Now, this is another one of those movies, and maybe just as we're recording the commentary it feels that way, but it does feel a little bit, it's run on a little too long.
Yeah, I wish they had
And yet
gotten
it's
to
only
the-
90 minutes.
Yeah, I wish they had gotten to the fight a
Yeah.
little more, or if they had battled a couple times. You know?
That's the point I was
maybe
making
where
earlier.
one has an upper hand in each one,
Yep.
you know, and then they kind of do some final.
And what they do instead is they basically tease out the fight for, 2/3 of the film's running time, and then they give you a third of the film's running time that is literally just this whole big climax.
Yeah. I mean, this movie you were talking earlier about when you get to these, iconic characters, and maybe there should have been a larger threat or somebody else.
Well, there should have been a third act surprise inclusion of some other horror character or somebody from the past of either one of these franchises. That would have been something that turns one last twist on the audience. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, so what I'm getting to is that this is basically the modern version of, Wolfman meets Frankenstein.
Yeah, of course. They've been doing this
Abbott
forever.
and Costello meet this and that. It's these team ups,
They've been doing it forever.
And they did, they didn't always have that third element back then. You know what I mean? And I think this was.
I just mean that to me, and it's just my own subjective opinion. The versus films to me that work better just follow that fundamental. Framework.
I think if they had made more, it would have gone that way.
Yeah, I agree.
You know what I mean?
Totally agree.
Because by the time they get to Freddy versus Jason versus Ash versus Michael, they would have had to have something. I don't know, like somehow they incorporate the actual idea of somebody wanting to bring modern.
Look, you know what it is? It's not kung fu fighting. What this is
wrestling.
WWE.
Yeah. Ronny Yu says it in the commentary.
It's wrestling.
Yeah. He goes, he had to figure out a way to make the smaller Freddy not seem ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's like his style of fight is to be over the top and try and get him, especially because he's in the real world. Well, it's funny because
when you look at mixed martial arts, size has absolutely nothing to do with the fights.
Right.
A small guy that knows great jiu-jitsu can take down a huge guy that doesn't. So it really doesn't matter. So it sort of could go either way.
I kind of love this idea too. The tanks.
I mean, a lot of characters flying through the air in this movie, which I think is fun.
Yeah, I mean, these are big stunts, all over the place.
And it's all done with like complex wire work.
This and the scene with that's coming up with all the rods, flying down on him right here. Oh, I love it.
It's very Final Destination.
It is.
It feels like right out of The Omen.
But it's
great.
it's how like Freddy has to, something has to slow him down a little bit for Freddy to have any sort of.
He's just pinning him to the ground.
Jason doesn't ever use like things around him. He just keeps coming at you with his machete.
Mm-hmm.
Freddy is actively thinking on his feet, and look at the blood.
It's like black blood too, which is really cool. It's like rotten, corrupted blood.
They talked about having to always cover all the camera equipment, and
I'm
and
sure
the
they
crew
did.
whenever they shoot these big scenes because the blood would fly everywhere.
And if anybody's ever worked on any sort of like a short film set or a film set, the blood they use it's like as sticky as glue. And when you're going to spend hours filming types of scenes with fake blood, it's so uncomfortable. It's so horrible. It gets everywhere and on and it's stuck to everything. It's terrible.
Coming up in a second when Freddy, I think it's coming up. Yeah. Jason gets impaled on the machete, and then Freddy starts throwing these metal plates at him, which maybe already happened. I can't remember. But if if you look, the metal plates form the New Line logo.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
When
I kind of like
the
that.
last set that is coming at them.
The amazing thing is, this movie I mentioned earlier was made for $30 million budget and made almost $120 million in theaters.
Yeah.
120 mil. That's 4 times. It made more than its budget on its opening weekend. 36 million opening weekend. For 2003 horror film exhibition standards, unbelievable. That's like a once in a generation hit.
It's interesting, though. The reason why I kind of put this quote up on the screen that we're looking at about what it made was that I thought it was interesting that the first 2 weeks, it was #1, and then third week, 6th place. It really quickly
There's
dropped.
a phenomena in box office called front loading, where all your fans are going to go on those first 2 weekends. You have your diehard fans who will show up the first weekend, and then you have the less diehard fans who want to wait for the crowds to die down that will go weekend 2, and then a lot of these movies have like a 50 or 60% drop off by weekend 3. That's why nowadays you see movies get to streaming in so much quicker, because they're in the theaters so much less.
Mm-hmm. And, back then, too, it's why...
I can't remember. Does Jason wear Freddy's glove in this movie?
No, but
he should have.
He rips off Freddy's arm.
That's
and just
what it
uses it to,
I would have loved to see Jason actually put Freddy's glove on in a dramatic way.
Yeah.
And then attack him with it. Wouldn't that have been cool to see Jason wearing Freddy's glove?
Oh, yeah.
That would probably have been in the sequel.
Yeah.
Maybe they were saving it, because I can't be the only one who would have thought of that idea. And here you have Freddy using Jason's main weapon.
Yeah.
I also like the subtle size increase in the machete Jason uses. If you've ever seen an actual machete, it certainly doesn't look like that.
No. It's the same thing with the butcher knife that Michael has. Yes,
exactly.
it was a real butcher knife back in the 70s, but it's
in a 6'5" stunt performer's hand, a regular butcher knife is going to look like a Swiss Army knife.
If you actually see the one in person like they use, it's really big. Like I don't think they really make that for standard kitchenware anymore.
The other thing is, a machete's not really a stabbing weapon. It's a rounded edge.
He's always going into an open wound already.
And he's rotted. He's like rotted tissue, so it makes sense. Yeah. I mean, hey, look, you know what I appreciate about this climax is it's gnarly.
Oh, yeah.
And it's bloody, and there's a lot of great, like when Freddy's just hacking at Jason with the machete, it's brutal.
The way he looks at his hand after Freddy cuts off his fingers is a nod to the final Friday 13th final chapter.
Ooh.
When he gets stabbed in the hand between the fingers, he kind of does the same look at his hand in the same exact way. But so right there, that was a big stunt. 2 guys on fire.
Flying through the
air.
That's like
they won an award or something for that, yeah.
You just brought it up, and I'm going to put it on Haddonfield Radio airwaves right now, because I believe it. In 2024 is when it's really starting to get traction. Stunt people deserve to be nominated for Oscars.
Yeah.
There should be an Oscar category for stunt performers and stunt direction by now.
Yeah, yeah. They do a lot more acting in these roles than you think, especially horror films, you know what I mean, where they can be put in makeup and whatnot. And, the original Nightmare had a record set when they have the Freddy's on fire running down Nancy's basement stairs. That set a record for the longest burn at the time.
Oh, wow.
In a film of stunt, and I think then this one set a new record,
Going back to Kane Hodder, if you look at Kane Hodder, he is actually really scarred. Because he's had burns that have gone so bad in his stunt career. He has one of the most incredible stunt careers you could ever imagine. But he shows the wear and tear from it.
Cool little swap there. You think it's Jason walking up, and it ends up, And this is also a little bit of a tie to what Freddy's dead, because he gets killed by his own glove in that as well.
Yeah. Yep.
And then when we see sort of Jason coming out of the water in a minute, and it's daytime. That was inspired, Ronny, you said, from Apocalypse Now, the scene with Martin Sheen's character coming out of the water.
Oh, when his head rises up out of the water. Oh, yeah, that's a very cool moment.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And that isn't supposed to be heaven or hell. That's, you know, they're implying that that's the next morning, that's here, that's, you know.
A lot of really well done severed heads in this movie. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Like really well done severed heads. And a lot of times that severed head prop in a movie really takes you out of the moment because it doesn't look like the person or it doesn't look at all like the actor. There's some really good ones in this.
This was actually really tough too because this tank that they filmed in is highly chlorinated and they put debris in it so it looks like swamp water, but he was forcing Ken to have his eye open there, and he said it just hurt so much.
Yeah, I would imagine.
And he couldn't breathe because he couldn't see any. He's supposed to be dead, basically, you know. So no air was supposed to be coming out of him, and you know. And the movie was going to end originally from here. It was going to cut to the Nancy's or Laurie's house, saying like 6 months later, and it was supposed to be the two of them in bed about to have sex for the first time, and then all of a sudden the dude starts getting rough, and she's like, "What's wrong with you?" And he lifts up his hand, and the blades come out and come at her, and then it ends. But again, he felt it was too ambiguous. Of like, people don't know. Does that mean Freddy's alive? Is he possessed? This guy? Is that a dream? Is it real?
The hockey mask with the Freddy slashes is so cool.
And this,
so cool.
This isn't Ken, actually. This is somebody else.
Yep.
Who did the scene. And he was saying how tough it was because there's actually a rope in the water that he had to use with the same hand he's holding the head to kind of hold him down as he starts to walk so he wouldn't float.
And see, that ending actually does. You are absolutely right about something. I think that sets up the sequel where they were going to be working together. Because here you have Jason carrying Freddy's head out. He's not carrying Freddy's head out to stab it.
No.
He's saving Freddy.
And there was actually, I think they talked about filming something added to that too. I can't remember if it was, I think the Pinhead thing was definitely in there, but I feel like there might have been more. They might have actually done something with Ash.
Okay,
yeah. And then they
possibly.
I think it just got to be too convoluted and everything. But you know,
again, not a perfect film by any stretch.
No.
But a really enjoyable experience, a fun film with a lot of great moments. And I will say this, and I'm sure Joe would agree: any chance you can get to see Freddy Krueger on screen, especially when he's being portrayed, of course, by the inimitable and brilliant Robert Englund, I'm going to take that opportunity. And in terms of finally, after decades, seeing these two characters share the screen together, it certainly could have been a hell of a lot worse.
Oh, no, of course. This could have gone very badly. And, like I said, if you don't try to expect too much from it and you just go in having fun, I mean, yeah, it's a film that you can nitpick and all this stuff, but it's not, they're not trying to make a masterpiece. I think
Ronny Yu set out to make an entertaining, exciting time at the movies, and that's exactly what he did.
Yep.
That's what he was successful at that.
Yeah, he did.
I'm surprised Ronny Yu hasn't had more of a directorial career since Freddy vs. Jason and Bride of Chucky. But I can't think of much that he's done on certainly on American shores since then. No. Maybe he returned and did more Hong Kong films. I'm woefully ignorant. I'd have to look that up. But
I wonder why they really didn't do more sequels since this seemed to be a success. I wonder if
120 million. They never made a sequel.
Right? Because right after this, they do the Friday the 13th remake
and made it bigger than ever in 2009.
But so clearly the rights were up for sale again, not too long after this for Jason. So maybe New Line just couldn't. Do more because
got
they
outbid.
Lost Jason. Yeah,
probably got outbid. And like we've said, as we were telling this story, the rights for these films have changed. For that film has changed so many times that it just is par for the course to continue on that way into the future.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I don't know. I've enjoyed every minute of talking about Freddy vs. Jason, and on a larger sense, I have thoroughly had the time of my life, and I'm sure Joe has as well, watching all of the films in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise with you guys for season 2 here at Haddonfield Radio. I cannot believe, number one, that we've already finished season 2. I can't believe we've done 2 full seasons of Haddonfield Radio. We've covered all the Halloween films, all the Nightmare on Elm Street films, and we've got more to come. You probably can guess where we're going next.
Make sure if you're checking out our episodes right here live that you don't miss our Labor Day live stream that will be coming up where we'll be talking about new projects, new
September
seasons.
2nd, 2024. It's called Haddonfield Radio Presents The Basement Strikes Back Live. And we will be doing that from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on September 2nd, on Labor Day.
We're going to do our Nightmare on Elm Street rankings and talk about a whole bunch of stuff. So
I'll be talking about a bunch of new horror movies. We'll be announcing what's coming up for Season 3, Haddonfield Radio. Talking about our brand new series that will be partnered with Season 3 of Haddonfield Radio. So we've got a lot to cover. That's going to be a real... If you've watched any of our previous live streams, we don't take them any less seriously than any of our other episodes. They're produced and created and pre-thought out. And live is just so we can interact with you guys, and that's it. But otherwise, they're just real episodes of our show as far as we're concerned. So we're going to be covering a lot of fun stuff, so tune in.
And we'll have a few bonus surprise episodes in between Season 2 and when we start Season 3. So
yeah,
we've
got some
stuff
before Season 3 starts up soon. We've got a couple really fun surprises coming to share with you guys that hopefully you guys will enjoy. So to tide you over until we begin Season 3 of Haddonfield Radio. So I don't know. I've just had a blast doing this episode. I've had a blast all season long. I can't believe we've already finished Nightmare on Elm Street.
It's crazy. That was fun.
I just really hope that you guys enjoyed this season of Haddonfield Radio. I really, truly do hope that you guys had fun with these episodes and had fun with our version of the story of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. We've got another big story to tell for Season 3 that I hope you guys are going to enjoy, and I think you guys will. And Joe and I are very excited about it, and we've been thinking about it and getting ready for it, and we decided on what Season 3 would be a while ago. And so we've had some time to think about it. But we are going to take, if you're a listener in the present, we are going to be taking a little tiny hiatus as we prepare for Season 3. But that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be plenty to look forward to. We've got a couple of special episodes, surprise episodes.
There'll still be new content
episodes.
between Season 2 and Season 3. Don't worry, we're not disappearing.
No.
But anyway, thank you guys. This has been amazing as always.
I loved this.
I love going over these movies.
Thank you so much for tuning in for all these episodes covering the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise's history, legacy, and lore. Joe and I have loved every minute of it and certainly loved being here with you guys down in Joe's basement. And we've got more to come, as I've said, so yeah, we love you guys. That's all. I just want to say hello to my mom, because I know she's listening, and I love you. And hello to my niece Frankie, who's also a YouTuber and loves to be mentioned. And my little chihuahua, Walter.
I just want to say it is now safe to go to sleep.
It is now safe to finally go to sleep. Freddy's no more. You can all relax. We have a brand new, horrifying villain to cover next, so we'll be there pretty soon, before you know it.
Yeah.
If you're a listener in the future, you already know what we're doing, because you can go watch the episodes right now. But if you're a listener in the present, we'll be there soon. And if you're a listener in the past, why are you listening to a podcast? You're stuck in the past. Start building a time machine. But anyway, anything else?
No, that's it.
All right, well, we love you guys. Thank you so much for Season 2. Thank you so much for supporting our creativity here at Haddonfield Radio. We'll be back soon with more. I guess, as always, with anything else?
No.
All right, we love you guys. My name, as always, is Christian White.
And I'm Joe Francazio.
And please, as always, and forever, have a very happy Halloween. And we'll see you soon.